This team is pissed. They're being disrespected.
Their seat will start to get very warm, and this will set the tone for the rest of the season.
He just has a history of not showing up in the first game of the season.
What do you do when service academies are laying over 21? You fade the hell out of them.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Week 1 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Colin Wilson. We are all the way back. No more of this Week 0 stuff with a horrible slate, which ended up being pretty entertaining. We have a full slate of games. Decent amount of FBS, FCS, but I think around 40 FBS versus FBS matchups. And we have college football on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and even Monday. And we'll get to it all. If I had a bet, if I was a betting man, and I am, I'd bet we get to about 30 games in some form or fashion. My notes here are just pages and pages. Could have wrote a novel. My head's about to explode. I've trying to prep for NFL and college football. Then I'll go on Twitter. Someone will be talking about some college basketball teams returning production, and I'm like, nope, getting right out of this app. So it is good to be back. Couple quick announcements. The 3 and out portion of the show, and we're adding a 4th down, which is this year, which is our favorite bet overall. We're doing that live on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We already did that. It'll be the same. It'll still be in the end of the podcast. Podcast will be the same. But if you want to get, favorite underdog, our money on underdog parlay, our favorite bet, and then the Friday night games, which will all be at the end of this podcast. If you want to get them early, we will be doing them Thursday night at 6 p.m. Eastern. We did them a day early, and this podcast a day early since it's week 1 and there's no NFL. Also had an announcement, a hiring announcement today with Johnny Manziel, who former Heisman Trophy winner. He's coming on to join us this fall for some work. It's not going to change the main podcast episodes. Group of 5. Make sure you check out the Group of 5 guys. Their episode, our recap episode with the voicemails. Don't forget about the voicemail. And then our main episode, this one, previewing the weekend. None of those are going to change, but he's going to do a segment on the new BCS show, a YouTube segment, and then also a segment for our live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, every Saturday. So excited to see what Mr. Manziel can bring to the table and offer some of his insight and perspective in terms of playing at A&M and being a collegiate quarterback and some of his insights there. So that's exciting. And then one other piece of housekeeping. Last year, our friends over at the Favorites ran a free NFL Pick'em contest and gave away over $100,000 in cash prizes. It's no gimmick. They give away $100,000. They don't ask for anything. And they just announced they're bringing it back for this NFL season. So if you want a chance at their $40,000 first place prize and over $100,000 in total cash prizes this season, go to favorites.actionnetwork.com to sign up now. That's favorites.actionnetwork.com to sign up now. It's just 5 picks against the spread every week. The $40,000 first place prize plus thousands more up for grabs every week. Can't lose. It's totally free to play. Just go to favorites.actionnetwork.com now. Sign up. Make your week 1 picks today. All right, Colin. We are all the way back. Before we dive in to week 1, we'll start with Thursday night. I'll just get quick 2-minute thoughts on week 0. My quick thoughts, pace was slower. Part of that could have been, the communication with the helmets and quarterbacks adjusting to that. We'll see how it's hard to take too much from a very limited sample size, but we'll see what kind of impact that has. And I'm sure it's going to be different for every team, which team relies on that more, which quarterbacks just struggle adjusting, especially early on. That's something to keep an eye on. Also, you just had I've had a pretty good run in college football the last 5 years. I was just telling Colin and our producers, my week 1s, I haven't had a winning week 1. I haven't had a good, decent, average week 1 in ages. Since the Stone Age. I can't figure out week 1 for what it's worth. So hopefully, maybe I'm just due this year. But week 1 in college football is hard, especially now. And it's getting harder each year with, I get better as I can look at some of the schemes, spots, get some data, get info, injuries. Week 1, if you can nail player evaluation, because you're going to have a lot of teams like Florida State hyped up transfer portal classes. It's difficult to put all those pieces together. Sometimes the hype is too much. They flopped. That defensive line was a flop against Georgia Tech. The offensive line was also a flop. They just didn't have it at receiver. And then you're going to have teams that either change coaches or complete roster overhauls that are awful or are significantly improved, like Nevada. I think their coaching upgrade was huge. So I think last weekend just illustrated how much variance there is there's always going to be a lot of variance in college athletics, but how much in the first game for teams in college football. But I'm looking forward to diving in to week 1, and I'm due. The football guys, I'm due for week 1. Colin, what was the takeaway or two from week 0 for you?
Well, I think it reinforces the fact that all you're trying to do is go 500 in week 0 and week 1, because since 2021, when this transfer portal took over the sport, it's becoming harder and harder to mix these coaches and transfer players together, especially when those transfer players don't have a lot of experience because they weren't given playing time, or maybe they underachieved, or maybe there was attitude problems. I mean, there's just so many floating variables that is not open to even people that are close to the programs, like the connections that you and I have. It's still really tough to get things out there. And a lot of coaches are kind of shutting down. Like, there's no such thing as public practices anymore. There's no such thing as me creating a TARP file in May and it's just done. That's what the experience number is. It's becoming tougher and tougher to have visibility of what these teams are going to be out of the chute. So the goal is to go week 0, week 1, try to get 500, and then massive adjustments to power ratings where needed. I'll give you a prime example, Stuck. Florida State got moved down 7.5 points. It's one of the craziest adjustments. Maybe Colorado last year was a pretty crazy adjustment to begin the season because of how crazy they were in the transfer portal. But Florida State, I took off 7.5 points off their power rating. And it was based upon the fact that this defense was nothing like what we thought it was going to be. They were soft on the trench on both sides of the ball. The secondary was supposed to be one of the top 10 in the nation, couldn't tackle, took bad angles. It was a whooping that, Georgia Tech even got 3.5 points bumped to theirs. So what Stuck is talking about, from week 1 to week 2, you're going to see massive power rating swings as we get the identity of what these teams are. So I guess my advice is play it a little bit lighter. There's 5 days of football here. You don't have to play 90 games. If you do, maybe you want to limit how much you're betting and let you absolutely have a great feeling, or you're good at second half betting. But week 2 is when it's really going to fire up, when we get an identity on these teams. And then on the flip side, teams like Nevada, that was just past breakup university going on over there with everything that SMU put up in the air. They just ball hawked to it. Last year, Nevada finished 92nd on target allowed, and they were just out there knocking everything down that Jennings and Stone threw in the air. So again, this is fact finding. Week 2, it really comes down. We know these identities, and we get into overlooks and hangovers and fraud box scores. So this is going to be a lot of fun. A huge slate for us to get ready to start to build a resume for each one of these teams.
Yeah, you said goal is to go 50%. No, I'm going to correct you there. No, my goal is to win every bet. So let's roll. Let's break these games down and find some winners. And ultimately, when this podcast is working best is when we can either, you're on the fence of a bet, we can lead you to that bet, or maybe staying off of it. So, we appreciate all the listeners here, and it's good to be back for another year. So let's dive. And by the way, I don't know. I think that the Florida State adjustment, well, we'll get to that game. We got Monday to get to. We got to get through Thursday. So let's start Thursday. Let's start with North Carolina, Minnesota, rematch from last year. This game will be at Minnesota. Line is ping-ponging all around. You had early money on Minnesota, and then it's been just nonstop money on North Carolina since line crossed the 0 from Minnesota -2.5 to now North Carolina -2.5. Total ping-ponged around as well. A lot of that is to do with some injury uncertainty on Minnesota. Their star running back, Darius Taylor, he might not go. Their star receiver, Jackson, he might not go. So, and the depth, especially at receiver, is not great. Taylor, there's some better depth at running back, but Taylor's explosiveness would be sorely missed, and what he's able to do. North Carolina has a very good running back in their own in Amarian Hampton. Last year, Minnesota shut him down. The problem was Drake May threw all over them, threw for, I think, 400 yards. And I believe they ended up winning that game like 30-14, somewhere in that ballpark, somewhere around 44-45 total points scored. UNC rebuilding their entire offensive line. So that's something to watch. And Drake May is no longer around. So is it going to be Max Johnson? Is it going to be Connor Harrell? Is it going to be both of them, which has been hinted at? So, I think that when I first looked at this game, I like the under. There's a lot of uncertainty with the injury situations, but both teams have new defensive coordinators. I think Jeff Collins will improve that North Carolina team. It'll be simpler, which will lead to fewer busts. And I think Minnesota is also simplifying their defense, will lead to fewer busts. I think their defensive front is improved. You also get Lindenberg back healthy at linebacker. The questions are in the secondary, but am I convinced that North Carolina, with their new quarterbacks, can fully take advantage of it to send this game into a high scoring mode? Not really. I think North Carolina, with two new quarterbacks on the road with the helmet comps, could be a little slower as well, known as a faster team. So I think both defenses give up fewer explosives. You have the injury uncertainty with Minnesota's stars on offense, and it's PJ Fleck. He's a snail. He wants to go slow with or without Taylor. He's probably going to hand it off a bunch. There is a new quarterback in Minnesota as well with Max Brosmer, the New Hampshire transfer. Love throwing it short at New Hampshire. We'll see if he takes some more deep shots here in Gopher country. But yeah, and I'm not a fan of the UNC new offensive coordinator as well, but lots of uncertainty with changing rosters and coordinators and injuries. This sums up week one. But 50 or better, I like the under. Not a huge play, but I think that this game should be played at a slower pace. And there's no Drake May to throw for 400 like last year. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I like North Carolina in this game simply because I see advantages on both sides of the ball, and there's questions around this Minnesota team with the injuries. We'll see how that comes to light. PJ Fleck said in his presser, everybody will know what's going on 2 hours before the game when the depth chart is released. So that's definitely something for everybody to watch. Now, centering around PJ Fleck here, he was looking to take another job and leave Minnesota. He wanted that UCLA job. It's pretty public out there that that's what he wanted to do. He's not been good in season openers. He's only covered 2 of the 7 years he's been at Minnesota. And if you go back to Western Michigan, it wasn't good back then either. So he just has a history of not showing up in the first game of the season, which we are going to talk about with other teams today. But, we're going to go with a new quarterback here. Max Brosmer comes in from New Hampshire. After a 4-year career, only 9.5% of his passes go longer than 20 yards, which means he is what Drew Aller was last year, just a dink and dunk and never taking shots downfield. And Brosmer had 200 career rushing yards on design calls. So that means that he, if you're averaging 50 yards on designed runs yearly, that means that you're not going to be any kind of help for what Minnesota wants to do, which is heavy outside zone. Now, the big question is if Darius Taylor is going to be there. He's rumored to be injured for this game. There's a couple tweets out there saying kids saw him on campus. He was asked if he's going to play. He said yes. So if you want to take that for what it's worth, it's not an official, it's the most unofficial report you could ever get. But, Fleck insisted that the injuries will be known 2 hours before. So you can expect to see this line move pretty heavy, probably around 5 o'clock Central tomorrow. Taylor averaged 3.7 yards after contact. 15% of his runs went for more than 10 yards, which makes him an extremely important piece to this Minnesota offense, because if Max Brosmer can't get it downfield, you have no explosiveness out of this Minnesota offense. Now, when you look at the North Carolina defense, I do like Jeff Collins coming in. You're right. Both of these defensive coordinators that are now taking over these roles have said, we're just running base defense, right? We're not going to try to make it complex. We're not going to go with heavy blitz rates. So you could see, offenses having an easier time trying to read the defenses here. I expect a multiple front from North Carolina coming out with a nickel package, a lot of cover 3 and quarters to eliminate explosives. That's really what Jeff Collins' calling card has been, besides him eating at the Waffle House, which I like to do too. Edge came in Rucker, and linebacker Power Eccles are the 2 names to know on the North Carolina side. They were the 2 highest graded rush defenders on the team per PFF. Kevin Hester at nose had 13 stops in limited action. Now he's going to be a full-time role player on that defensive line. That gives them the advantage. I think the North Carolina offense is the big question, Stuck, because there's some holes in the offensive line. I expect there to be some pressure if Minnesota can create it. Max Johnson is really the better quarterback for that, considering what he's been through at LSU and Texas A&M. He's never had an offensive line his entire career. If anybody knows how to skirt around some pressure coming through, Max Johnson has seen it his entire life. And then you get to Harrell. He's more of an RPO. So I think what Mac Brown is going to do is try to, figure out the flow of this game, what's going to work, because he's got two different quarterbacks that do two different things. And Amari Hampton has to get free. He wasn't able to get let loose last year. So I do like North Carolina. The number is going to move simply based on what these injury statuses is. I make the number a pick if everybody's healthy, if that helps. So I grab North Carolina at +1. I'm not sure if I'd take it at 2.5 or 2. I would wait for the injury report.
All right, let's move on to a game I'm excited for. Two of them this weekend. They have the number 1 and number 2 teams in the FCS going on the road to play Power 4 teams, which is awesome on a weekend with a lot of marquee games on top, which we'll get to in just a moment. North Dakota State heads to Colorado, sitting around a 9.5. Let's see if it touches 10. It does. I think it has periodically over the past 24 hours. Total sitting around 60. The over is taking some money. It's ticked up a bit. Really interesting game. I mean, North Dakota State, they bring back their 2 quarterbacks, but they lose 3 starters in the offensive line. 2 will make their first collegiate start, replacing them. They lose their top running back and top 2 wide receivers from last year. Defensively, they do bring a ton back, but their future pro, Wisniewski at safety, who's their best player, he's out. That's a huge loss. And this North Dakota State team, look, they're number 2 in FCS. They had 4 losses last year. It's not the same team. Interestingly enough, they have a new head coach as well, who is their first offensive-minded, so to speak, head coach in over 20 years, Tim Polasek. But where was his previous 2 stops? At Wyoming and Iowa. Wyoming and Iowa. Can we really call that offensive-minded at those 2 stops? So these are on the field, you're going to see 2 very different offenses. North Dakota State wants to be physical, run the ball, overpower Colorado. And in Colorado, you might see some 10 personnel. They're going to try to spread out this North Dakota State team and, let Shedeur Sanders in shotgun just cook. And, Colorado's wide receivers, their wide receiver room is outstanding. They only added to it in the offseason. That's going to be a problem for this North Dakota State secondary. It really just comes down to, does Sanders get enough protection? Because the questions on this Colorado team are the running back. Still some questions there. The offensive line, they did upgrade it. And then the defense. The defensive went out and they added a ton of transfers, 23 defensive transfers, a ton lost as well. The defensive line, I like the talent there. They brought Warren Sapp in as a new defensive line coach. Can he kind of mesh that unit together? Because I do like the talent. And, are they going to be able to hold their own at the point of attack against this physical North Dakota State team? So, when I look at this game, when I look at Colorado, we talked about it before the year, the depth at a number of positions is a concern. And quarterback, too. If Sanders goes down, this team's cooked. But this is the best version of Colorado, right? From a depth perspective, it's game 1. It's at home. My FCS numbers are not too refined right now that I'm like overly in love with them. But if I had to bet it at 10, I might look at North Dakota State. But got a sneaky suspicion that the Colorado passing attack and no Wisniewski, it's just going to be too much for North Dakota State. And the Colorado defense should at least be a little bit improved. What say you?
Yeah, you called out the one player that North Dakota State desperately had to have. I don't think Tim Polasek is a huge departure from what North Dakota State always does. I mean, he was there for the better part of 10 years under Craig Bohl, and Craig Bohl is a North Dakota State tree. I mean, they're all in the coaching tree here, so it's probably just same old for North Dakota State. But the handicap to me in this game comes down to 2 factors: Colorado's ability to stop the run against North Dakota State, and North Dakota State's ability to pressure Shedeur Sanders. Because remember, the best defenses were able to flush him out of the pocket and keep him from connecting downfield. especially on comeback routes whenever all the receivers would run it and have to make their way back to Shedeur. That's what you have to look at. Now let's start off to see if Colorado can actually stop the run. The Buffaloes went out through the portal and they got edge Dayon Hayes from Arizona State. He had 10.5 tackles for loss. They got edge Samuel Okunlolo from Pitt. He had 5 sacks last year in limited action. And then defensive tackle BJ Green is a big pickup for them, 6 sacks from the interior for Arizona State. So Colorado should improve on what was a horrific defense that ranked 116th in success rate against the rush. But I'm not sure that's good enough to go ahead and stop them. Now, the other handicap was, can North Dakota State keep assignments in the secondary when Shedeur eventually is flushed from the pocket and he looks downfield? The secondary does return 44 starts, but the Wisniewski was all conference, 4 PBUs, a massive 8 interceptions last year. He was the highest graded safety in all of FCS. There are other players here that are high quality in the secondary. Safety Sam Jung was also had 7 passes defensed. Linebacker Logan Kopp had 3 INTs and 2 PBUs. And defensive edge Dylan Hendricks is a first-team All-Missouri Valley. He had 10.5 tackles for loss going against. It looks like Hendricks is going to go against the projection is a true freshman at left tackle for Colorado. That could be a serious issue that gets Shedeur out of the pocket real quick. The number that I wanted was 6 on Colorado. It never got there in the summer. There was never any dip. And now I'm looking at the market right now. There's just so much love for Colorado. I'm not sure we're going to get clear visibility where this line is going to settle because there's Colorado money being pumped into this market at all times.
I would wait. If you want North Dakota State, wait.
I do. And I want double digits. And I have a feeling there is going to be a massive pump on Thursday night into Colorado with this game coming up. So I'm going to sit and wait. At double digits, I am intrigued and probably going to get a play in on North Dakota State.
Finally, we'll do this one quickly. Coastal at Jacksonville State, right around a field goal favorite. This is a rematch of last year. Coastal Carolina won that game by double digits, but they had Grayson McCall at quarterback. Now, you go into this game, 2 rebuilds. These 2 teams, Jack State lost their quarterback, top 2 running backs, top 2 wide receivers, 5 of their top 6 tacklers, also new defensive coordinator, which I think is a big loss. And this is a team that last year got pretty lucky. They had miracle wins versus UTEP, Sam Houston, and Western Kentucky. The Coastal side of the ball, when it comes to Coastal, 29 transferred out, 66 new players. They have questions. Interior of the offensive line, the wide receiver room is gutted. The D loses their top 3 players. The special teams are bad. They're less talented than last year. Relying on pulling guys from lower levels, which you're seeing, goes back to another thing that makes week 1 in the early season more difficult. Is you got to try to evaluate, okay, how much of a step is this guy going to be able to translate from JUCO, from FCS, from D2? And, that's where some of these lower level programs have to start to reach into in this new college football landscape. I think with both of these rebuilds, you got to just take, if at 3, I think you just got to take the points. I think these 2 teams, I actually have like Coastal a hair ahead of Jack State in my power ratings. Jacksonville State, it's not the biggest home field advantage in all of college football. And as long as it's Ethan Vasco for Coastal, I trust all this guy has done is overperform every time he gets a chance.
Yep.
But Noah Kim, who I don't like, that's what scares me, who transferred from Michigan State, he's getting some work too, and it said it's going to be a game time decision. I hope it's Vasco, because if I want to bet, because I like Coastal at +3. Jack State, meanwhile, they have wars. They lost Webb, their quarterback. You have Logan Smothers is back. You have Huff, the transfer from Furman, and then you have Zion Turner, who brought him from UConn. Rich Rod said Huff, all 3 could get looks tomorrow. So a lot of quarterback uncertainty this game. I think at a field goal, you got to look Coastal. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. At 3, you're going to have to get Coastal here, but I would like it if Ethan Vasco was the quarterback. I have the same feelings about Noah Kim as you. Is just atrocious at Michigan State. And Ethan Vasco helped Coastal win their second bowl ever against San Jose State in the Hawaii Bowl. It was a really big cash for all of us last year. Beck has completely gone away from Chadwell's RPO system. He's gone to a pro style. He likes quick hitting routes out by the boundary. They did finish 21st in quality drives, but Grayson McCall was on this offense last year, although he did not have.
Yeah, he missed over half the year.
Yeah, he missed over half the year, and that's why I would think that Vasco would be the starter here with no issues, but it doesn't seem to be the case. The wide receiver unit does take a hit. The portal gave them Malik Mega from Penn State, Seneca McKee from UNLV. We'll see what they can produce. But the key to stopping Jacksonville State is to stop the run, and that's not what Coastal's defense is set up for. Actually, their secondary is the best unit out of all 3 levels. So we'll see what can happen there. You mentioned all the quarterbacks that Jacksonville State is going to field. There's another Zion in here. Anwar Lewis and Ron Wiggins are back. They're going to return to the backfield. That's going to use probably both of them at the same time. Very deep running back room. 64% of the snaps are going to go to all the multiple run concepts that Rich Rod wants to run. But again, there's only 9 returning starters total on both offense and defense, and they don't return more than 50% to any side, to anything on either side of the ball. Run, pass, offensive line snaps, tackles, PBUs, pressures, all under 50% from experience perspective for Jacksonville State. So, I make the total 57 in this game. It popped down the biggest key number of 55 down to 54.5. With 50% chance of rain in this forecast, I'm kind of waiting to see if this number drops a little bit more, considering the tempo that Rich Rod loves, which is 20.9 seconds per play. That would make me think I want to lean to the over, especially since Coastal's defense's specialty is in the secondary, not on the defensive line. I think both teams can score here. So I do like Coastal in the 3. I make it more like a pick. And then I would look at the over once we get south of the number of 55. Hopefully that chance of rain grows higher. Number drops a little bit more.
All right, good stuff there for your Thursday night football. And we'll get to Friday night football when we go 3 and out later in this show. But now it's time for our marquee matchups of the weekend. All right, let's start with a big one. At noon in Atlanta between number 1 Georgia and Clemson. These two teams opened the season against each other a few years ago in an absolute dogfight. No pun intended. Super low scoring game. These two teams used to play every single year. Used to be a non-conference rivalry, I think from like the 60s to the 80s for like 20 years. I love when these two teams play. Georgia sitting at around 13.5 point favorite here. Total sitting at 48.5. All I wanted in this game was Clemson plus 14. And I was able to get it. And I just was watching the market. I don't know where it's going to be when this comes out. I would recommend, if you agree with me, to watch the market. I think there'll be more Georgia money coming in, more likely than Clemson money. But the only thing is that there's injuries, suspension news that could come out for Georgia that could push this number down even further. So even at 13.5, I would take Clemson over Georgia. What am I talking about with all of this uncertainty? Well, it's been a messy offseason for Georgia. Arrests out the wazoo. Ra Thomas kicked off the team and headed into this, game. ETN, their star back they got from Florida, is he going to play? DUI arrest, might be suspended. A couple backs behind him are dealing with injuries. This is already a team that lost Milton and Edwards at running back. So now they obviously have talent everywhere when you're talking about Georgia, but now the experience starts to get very, very low. Pass catchers, Bowers and McConkey are gone. You lose Mims to the NFL as well, but you have Truss back, and he was hurt last year. I don't think it's a huge loss. Center, bigger question mark with Van Pran gone. We'll see how that plays out against a really good Clemson defensive line. And I think the secondary could take a step back initially. You lost Bullard, Lassiter, and Smith to the NFL. And then at linebacker, Munden, is he going to play? Dumas Johnson went off to Kentucky. Obviously, ton of young talent there, but experience drop. And do they have that? I love Williams. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. But do they have that? They don't have that, at least as of right now, that dominant player on the interior who can just wreck the entire game. So, there's some questions on this Georgia team relative to, being the best team in the country. I don't think that right now they're as dominant, as they were a couple years ago. It's going to take some time, and they're going to have to get a full roster together. Defensive, every level of their defense, there's questions. You lost all those pros in the secondary. Linebacker, Munden. Defensive line, interior depth has taken a hit. Center, your running back, even wide receiver, waiting to see who definitely steps up there across the board. On the Clemson side, there are definitely questions as well, starting at center. Is the center position going to be okay? That's the biggest question along the offensive line, which I do think will be better. Bring Matt Luke in, more experience. The offense in general, I expect to be better. Number one, just regression, turnovers, injuries, fumbles, just overall luck, red zone, things that they were just so unlucky in last year, and that naturally regressed the following year. Klubnik should be better in year 2 of Riley's system. The wide receiver room is much better, bringing 2 really good freshmen, and they should just be healthier. And now more Maffa. I was screaming that last year. Get Shipley out of here. More Maffa. So I think the Clemson offense will be better. The defense does lose a lot, but they just reloaded. I mean, this is a team that played 6 true freshmen last year that started 3+ games on the defensive side of the ball. The biggest question is at corner. They could have injuries there, and then you're down to freshmen, and things could get really dicey against Carson Beck. But at around 2 touchdowns, I like Clemson to keep this close. What say you?
Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, that was a lot of everything that I have there. So I do have the same feelings, the same sentiments about everything. And this is such a massive game. I mean, 4 national championships between these two since 2016. It's and crazy enough, the national championship is going to be played this year in this building. With Cade Klubnik, it's a question of, do you believe what he was able to do at the end of last year? He had
Definitely improved.
Oh, it very much improved. He had 19 turnover-worthy plays the entire season, but only 4 of them came in the last 5 games against South Carolina, North Carolina, Notre Dame, some other teams out there. Now, he had 12 big-time throws and 19 touchdowns. Now, the reason I bring that up and that discrepancy is because that is what shows you when his skill positions are actually doing the work and not him himself. And so the targets did all the work, and there's always been questions about, can the wide receiver stable create separation from defensive backs and get free so Klubnik can hit them? It looks like that's going to happen here. Antonio Williams should be completely healthy. He needs to return to form to what he had 2 years ago as an explosive guy out of the slot. Tight end Jake Brenningstool became one of the most favorite targets of Klubnik last year. But the guy that's turning heads in camp, the guy that everybody's talking about, his maturity, his explosiveness, his hands, everything, Bryant Westco. Very highly rated wide receiver that is going to get a lot of playing time here. Maybe he is the answer that we've been looking for a few years when it comes to targets in the Clemson passing game that need to create separation from the opposing secondary. Now, when you look at what Clemson is bringing back, it's like one of the best offensive line and running back combinations in the country. You mentioned that Phil Maffa is going to get all the carries. He's done sharing time with Will Shipley. He's done sharing time with Kobe Pace. It's finally Phil Maffa time.
We saw that worked against Notre Dame. That was like one of the best their offenses looked all year.
He's an animal, absolute animal. And, the offensive line is returning 70% of snaps. So we have everything that we need for the ingredients for Clemson on the offensive side of the ball here. But you mentioned it. I think the biggest X factor here is the fact that Matt Luke is the new offensive line coach. What was Matt Luke's last job? He was the offensive line coach for Kirby Smart at Georgia. Kirby Smart mentioned that this week. If he's mentioning it out loud, it's a big deal. So there's a lot of feathers in the cap here for the Clemson offense to see if they can get something done. And then you mentioned what's going on in this Georgia defense. Not only are there some depth issues on the defensive line, there's a couple injuries that are happening on the interior. There's kind of a big, chatter going on about Mykel Williams coming off the edge and going back to outside linebacker. That kind of kills the depth that you have. And I know, listen, we're talking about Georgia. I understand that everybody's a 5-star down to the 3rd level. I get it. But experience is something, and Mykel Williams was a big part of that edge position last year. Now, 3 starters are gone from the secondary. You're going to see
all of the NFL.
Freshman KJ Bolden is going to get his first taste of action here. So it's, you're trying to punch holes into Georgia. You're looking for true freshmen. You're looking for units that have depth issues. We've got that all over here for Georgia. The suspensions, we know that it's just university policy, right? DUIs, reckless driving, you're going to get suspended. And that's what's going to happen to Florida transfer Trevor Etienne. He's going to be a part of that group. That's bad for a running back unit that already lost Rod Robinson. He had a toe in. I think he had surgery on his toe earlier this week. So he's definitely not playing this week. And I think that kind of leads to the fact that this total keeps going down. But if Georgia can't run the ball against this Clemson defensive line,
and if Clemson is one or a couple of their starting corners back, then Kirby Smart is outstanding coach, and they still center is a little bit of question. They're still one of the best offensive lines in college football. So you would think it's, hey, running back room's banged up. Clemson has some injury questions, and that's the room with the biggest question mark is their secondary. Let's come out and throw it all around. And we also think that the Clemson offense will be better, which would definitely I would not want the under here.
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't want the under either. I mean, the thing is people are focusing so much on Brock Bowers being gone. I get it. I love the numbers. I love the fact that he lined up at every single position on the field all the time. Well, Georgia fans, you're fine. Ben Urasek did the exact same thing for Stanford and Troy Taylor's offense. So they're going to be fine from that. But the question
Plus,
stuck
they
becomes,
did play without him. Like he was hurt too, so it's not like they.
That's when it was Ladd McConkey time, right? Whenever Bowers got hurt, it was time for Ladd. And so I think the question is, how quick into this game before Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator for Georgia, decides we're not going to try to run the ball with a walk-on that just transferred here from Texas. I think his name is Cash. Almost said Cash Wheeler. That's a wrestler. But, listen, this is going to be, I think, a fact-finding trip in the first half for Georgia. We got depth issues. We got freshmen. We might not be able to run the ball. How long does it take until they open up the offense? Well, my best bet for this that I've got money on, there are 7.5s out there. Clemson +7 or better in the first half. This team is pissed. They're being disrespected. And from a recruiting perspective, from a blue chip recruiting perspective, Clemson is right there with Georgia. You and I talked at length about when the depth issues and the transfer portal issues are going to catch up to Clemson. It's not going to happen in this game. So I expect Clemson to be able to run the ball against a defensive line that has some depth issues. I don't expect Georgia's run game to produce anything without their two top running backs. I like first half Clemson +7. I could even be talked into a money line in the first half on Clemson. And I tell you what, Stuck, if Clemson wins this game, I'm not going to be surprised. I won't be surprised at all because, listen, it's not that far off in the talent base.
Coming around on my to make the playoff future, which is why I bet it before the season. So, yeah, this is for the first time in a while. It's a Clemson podcast. Unfortunately, later in the show, it might not be LSU Tigers podcast, but maybe we'll get to that. I like that as well. I mean, I think for my bet, it would be, this is obvious to say, but I don't want Clemson playing from way behind. I need them to stay ahead of the chains, and that would end up in a disaster, I think. All right, good stuff there. Looking forward to that. And by the way, speaking of in regards to the total, it's being played at Mercedes-Benz Fast Track. Keep that in mind.
Oh, and I think the other thing too, if Bobo decides to come out and have Carson Beck throw in standard downs, first down, you see that right away, take a live over. I mean, if they've already decided they're not going to run the ball, it's going to be a big game.
By the way, I think Dabo's 9-1 against the spread, including the postseason, as an underdog of 6 or more points. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And the only loss was almost 10 years ago to the day against Georgia, for what it's worth.
I think half those wins are against Ohio State, but
hopefully history doesn't repeat itself 10 years later. All right, let's move on to the second marquee game of the day. Penn State will travel down to Morgantown, where many beers will be consumed on the fine streets there by the fine people who used to root for my guy, Mike Gansey. West Virginia, an 8.5-point underdog. They've taken some money. This line was 10 and above earlier in the summer. Total is ticked up to 51.5. The one thing that I'll note, and I'll let you break this one down, since I kind of ran with my ramble in Clemson, Georgia. Andy Kotelnicki, a couple years ago, dominated this defensive staff in Morgantown in the season opener when he was at Kansas. I believe they put up 55. Although they won by 13 in overtime. I think there was a pick 6 at the end. But the offense just went bananas. Penn State's offense should be much better under the tutelage of Kotelnicki. Can Drew Aller take that next step? A true number 1 wide receiver emerge? But with Kotelnicki, do you really need that? He spreads the ball around. Their offense definitely should be better. And is the question here, and I'll let you answer it, if the Penn State offense can move the ball under Kotelnicki against this West Virginia defense, which certainly isn't elite, is this just come down to Penn State being able to stop West Virginia's ground game? And if they do that, good night. If West Virginia's able to run it, we got a ball game. What say you?
Yeah, it's that easy. And I'll save the market for later because it's definitely a factor in this game. Listen, West Virginia can only compete here if the offensive line wins the trench with for their three-headed monster of quarterback Garrett Green, running back CJ Donaldson, and running back Jaheim White. They can move a pile. It just depends on when first contact is going to be. And the Penn State defense projects as the top defensive line and linebacker combo in the Big Ten this year. And defensive coordinator Tom Allen is a former, defensive coordinator and head coach of Indiana, and he is widely respected as one of the best in the business. Abdul Carter is going to switch positions here. He was at middle linebacker last year. He is such a havoc-minded player. They wanted to get him closer to the ball, so they moved him up to defensive end. So I do expect Penn State to maintain all of their rankings that they had the year before. They were 6th in defensive finishing drives. They were 1st in defensive quality drives. That means you couldn't get into scoring position. You couldn't get across the 50. You had a lot of 3-and-outs. Penn State was great at that, and I don't expect that to change whatsoever. And, of course, a staple of Penn State, no matter who the defensive coordinator is, they were 4th in defensive havoc. That's not going to go away. The questions all come on the offensive side of the ball going up against West Virginia. Sadly, I feel like we are in a situation we had with week 0 where you and I talked about sometimes you have so many transfers on a particular unit, you don't know what you're going to get. And I feel that's what we're getting in the West Virginia on the back end with them.
Yeah, they definitely tried to hit the portal to fix their secondary, which stayed very healthy last year. Guys like Beanie Bishop but there were some issues and some leaks, but they tried to fix that in the portal. So that's definitely the high variance part of this game.
Well, let's talk about what could go wrong with Penn State here. The fact that can Drew Aller grasp Andy Kotelnicki's offense? He's going to have to know so much motion, so much counter, so much misdirection, trick plays. This was not in the Penn State offensive playbook under Mike Yurcich at all. As a matter of fact, it became one of the most stale, boring, and predictable offenses that was in college football last year, which I believe is why a pink slip was issued. But, Drew Aller's adoption of that offense in the playbook, how much of it has he ingested? How much of it is he going to be able to produce? That is one area where this could go wrong for Penn State. Also, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. What happened to these guys last year? They both went, under 3 yards after contact? Neither of them were able to create missed tackles anymore. They just fell off a map when it came to being elusive and explosive. I don't think that was an offensive line problem. That was really all on them, especially yards after contact. Now, that brings me to the market because
teams also didn't respect the passing attack, which made it easier to defend the run.
And they loaded up, but still, Penn State ranked mid FBS on when they had first contact on their running back. So, it's not like they were being touched 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. It's just there was just no juice with these two and no clue why. And it never came back. Now, Drew Aller finally started taking deep shots, but it was still pretty limited there at the end of the season, I think, after they played Michigan. The market is raging on West Virginia right now. This is a number that I believe I had projected at like 15.5, and SP Plus has it at 14. We're south of 10, and it is still taking money. And I don't know if we're going to end up at 7. I don't know if we're going to end up at 6.5. And at what point do you take this? Because right now, the current market, as you and I are recording this, says that Penn State would beat West Virginia by 5 on a neutral field. That's crazy town. All right. I understand what West Virginia is offensively and defensively, but something I think bigger is going on here that is driving this. It can't just be service releases. It just can't be touts. It just can't be. There's got to be something that's driving this number because it is so far off the radar. If I had to pick out a spot, it's going to be the Penn State offense. So,
James Franklin will try to cover for you. Didn't you have West Virginia against Penn State when they did the ring around a Rosie?
Yeah, I was in case you guys don't know, there could be some Neil Brown revenge factor here going on for what was happening. I think the spread was 20.5 or 21. And it covered the entire game. I believe the game was sitting around 18 or 15 before Neil Brown called a timeout with about 1:20 left. And Neil Brown calling a timeout with 1:20 left, down by 2 or 3 possessions, pissed James Franklin off, and he decided to push it in as quickly and as fast as possible to cover that spread for Penn State. That was demoralizing. It was mentioned at Media Day, although I'm not going to talk about it because coaches won't talk about spreads, but it was mentioned that James Franklin did not really have to push that in. So there is a revenge factor here for West Virginia, but that can't be the reason that this number has dropped this much. So I say keep your eyes on the market. Keep your eyes open, or keep your ears open for any potential problems that are going on with this offense. Again, there could be suspensions. There could be things happening here that we don't know about. That we'll continue to work on. It's Wednesday. We got 3 days to go. We'll figure out what we can, we'll tweet out anything that I can find about why this number is moving so much.
Yeah, I'm around 11. I will say I do expect the Penn State offense be better, and I do expect the West Virginia rush offense, which ran for nearly just under 3,000 yards, which is best among all Power 5 teams last year. I do expect them to take a slight step back. Mainly, their offensive line is still going to be very good, top 20, top 15 in the country, but they lost their center, Zach Frazier, who's going to start week 1 in the NFL, and they lost a really good tackle. So his offensive line is still going to be really good, but you lose your 2 best. You're probably going to take a step back. They still have some really good ones, and if Penn State doesn't have to load the box and can slow down the run game, that was how Garrett Green would throw the ball, right? They were running all over you. Safeties had to come down. Then he's taking deep shots and vertical. Like, his accuracy, isn't the best. He's not going to drop back and beat you throwing intermediary. So Penn State can stop the run, get the push up front. That's problematic for the Mountaineer offense. For what it's worth, though, top 25 road teams, if you're into trends, in week 1 in college football over the past 20 years against unranked, easy for me to say. Let me say that again. Over the past 20 years, if you're into trends, top 25 teams on the road in week 1 against unranked opponents, only 42% against the spread. Speaking of which, we have another one in Miami that fits that mold. This game is huge. Miami minus 2.5 at Florida. This is the biggest game of the day. If Georgia loses to Clemson, it'll be great for Clemson's playoff hopes. Georgia still going to be favored to go to the college football playoff. Still going to be thought of as a national title contender. If Penn State loses to West Virginia, it might raise some eyebrows. But this Miami-Florida game, while Florida's not in the mix for a college football playoff berth or a national title, in large part due to their schedule, Miami is. And both of these coaches, in the event of a loss, their seat will start to get very warm. And this will set the tone for the rest of the season. And then obviously you have the rivalry between all of the Florida kids and these 2 programs in year 3 of both Mario Cristobal and your boy, Billy Napier. Scared money don't make money. By the way, Cristobal finally listened to this podcast and he hired a time management guy. You heard this?
And they gave him a 2 minute
to help him.
I saw that and I was thinking to myself, boy, Cristobal and Franklin can't figure out how to work a damn clock or call a timeout or take a knee. And now they get a free 2-minute warning timeout. Those lucky bastards.
Someone in this game is probably going to beat themselves. Penalties were a huge issue.
Yes.
You get the coaching, and then penalties were a huge issue last year for both teams. I think I've gone back and forth on this game 100 times. And I think where I ultimately came to is we're going to disagree. So I saw you put a bet in on Miami. If I'm curious to see your argument, the argument for me is, look, if I wanted to make a case for Miami, and this might be your case, in the trenches, they have the advantage. Their offensive line, it's Cristobal special, is very good. Their defensive line on paper is very good. Bain, Mestor back at defensive end, they're menaces. And then they added 2 in the portal in the interior. There is a chance that they just don't come together like Florida State, for what it's worth. And then you have Malinois in the middle, and as a linebacker who's just an absolute stud. It's going to be tough to run on Miami, especially when Florida has offensive line questions, especially on the right side. You're going to kick George into right guard. You have a new right tackle. Crenshaw Dixon, I don't think won the job, but you might see multiple guys there. The San Diego State transfer. So the right side of the offensive line is certainly a question going up against this aggressive Miami front. Where Florida does hold an advantage is I think they have a better secondary, because that's the sore spot for Miami. How will this secondary come together? One very reliable corner, but they lost some talent back there. How's it all going to come together? That remains to be seen. Graham Mertz back for Florida, and I'll sum up my thought on this so I can let you share yours. Because I keep going back and forth in this, but I do think that Florida and Napier have been much better at home. He's been very good in his time in Gainesville at home, which is one of the best home field advantages in college football for big games. I think they're going to be able to use Mertz's legs some, the misdirection, get Wilson the ball every way possible. For what it's worth, Montreal Johnson, their starting running back, is probably not going to play. But they still have some guys behind him. But use misdirection, use Miami's aggressiveness against them. And then, take some deep shots to take advantage of this Miami secondary. On the other side of the ball, Miami's front has an advantage, and they added Damian Martinez, a really good back. I'm just not sold on the consistency of Cam Ward. His highs are very high. His lows are very low. First start, all this pressure going into Florida. Think he might make a couple mistakes. Although, I spoke of that trenches. Like, does Florida have the guys that can really cause havoc off of the edge? Got some size in the middle, but can they find those guys who can cause havoc off the edge? That remains to be seen. But when I look at like all of the intangibles, Florida being at home under Napier, Cam Ward struggling on the road in his career, being inconsistent, and all of the pressure is on Miami. Florida, while it's a huge game for Napier, no one says they're a playoff contender. No one's given them a chance this season. If Miami loses this game, if Florida loses this game, there's not going to be like, oh, Florida, it might be Napier, it might be time, but if Miami loses, questions swirling. And so I think all the pressure's on Miami here. I know they're only a 2.5-point favorite. So, yeah, I don't love it either side. Like I said, I've gone back and forth. I think I might throw Florida in my round robin, but I'll let you make your choice for Miami.
To be clear, I took Miami minus 135 in the market. I like that money line better than swallowing 2.5 points. But that is a initial position, and I will probably come back on Florida Live if I can get a touchdown. So just to set the boundaries there, I did want to get on Miami because I see a lot of advantages. I don't hate Florida in this game, but let's talk about how I think the flow is going to go. Now, Cam Ward and Damian Martinez are in-house for Miami. And what's important to know about Cam Ward is he's the most Brett Favre that Brett Favre has ever been. I mean, 79 turnover-worthy plays in his career to 71 big-time throws. Then you look at his rushing numbers, 46 career fumbles in 4 years at Wazoo and Incarnate Word. The guy is a running powder keg. He can complete a 60-yard touchdown, and he can fumble. He can just hand you the ball in the opposite end zone. But Damian Martinez is a real deal. 20% of his rushing attempts last year for Oregon State went over 10 yards. That is a large number. Oregon State used a lot of heavy outside zone. That's going to change here with offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson. That's going to go to an inside zone, a lot of man. I don't think that will limit Damian Martinez here. It's just a little bit of a scheme change. Miami last year was top 10 in standard downs explosives. It's just a perfect combination for Martinez behind that offensive line. They're going to be able to move some people around. Now, the Florida defense, I don't really have a lot of love for. They fell out of the top 35 in stuff rate and line yards last year, and then they went and added Ron Roberts as a co-defensive coordinator with Austin Armstrong. Ron Roberts has been fired 2 years in a row from Auburn and Baylor. I'm not sure what he adds there. There was a personal relationship and a prior relationship with the Florida coach when he was at Louisiana. So, Florida is great against the pass. Their on-target number allowed, which is do you hit your wide receiver in stride in the numbers, they were top 25. The Florida secondary could at least change the path of pass catchers. So, there's reasons to like Florida here against the pass. They do return safety Jordan Castell, quarters Devin Moore and Jason Marshall return. Those guys are quality defensive backs. But I have no love for the front seven for the defensive threat here, and I expect Damian Martinez to move the chains consistently. Now, Graham Mertz, I absolutely love. I love him more than Cam Ward. I can tell you that. I'm on the Miami side, and I actually like Graham Mertz more. Career year numbers last year, lowest drop rate ever, 8th in on-target ball. He was extremely accurate, elite accuracy last year. Even more impressive, think about this, Stuck. Mertz was 8th in on-target ball. The offensive line was 78th in pass blocking. Like, that's pretty impressive split right there. That says
they went from 15th in the country in sacks allowed 2 years ago to 115th.
Yeah, and Graham Mertz is still nailing people in between the numbers. Now, Montreal Johnson, literally like 30 minutes ago, he was just announced that he is practicing without limitations. So we'll see if he's got this.
I thought he was going to be out.
Yeah, 3.5 yards after contact last year, and not the same level of juice that Trevor Etienne. He was just, like 4.2 yards after contact, but Montreal Johnson's still very high quality. And Shamara Dyke comes in from Wisconsin, and I know that there are not some good numbers for what was going on with the Badgers last year, but the 2022 numbers for Shamara Dyke when he was with Graham Mertz, he posted 2.3 yards per route run. That is Graham Mertz putting on an extremely comfortable pair of clothes, like a pair of jeans that he feels comfortable in. That's what he gets with Dyke out of the portal. But the Miami defense should be potentially the best in the ACC. You mentioned Ruben Bain. He doubled any other player's pressure rate on the team. I think he had 45 pressures, and I think the next highest was like 23. Interior Simeon Barrow was there, CJ Clark. They were both top 100 in PFF's pass rush productivity ranks. And then there's, an issue on the Miami defense. It's really going to be in the secondary. Corner Damari Brown is going to start here. He has the worst tackle grade of anybody on this roster. So simply running the ball or getting someone to catch a ball close to this corner is probably going to create some extra yards. But Stuck, I come back to this. The key to beating Miami is easy. This is going to be the handicap every week. Can you create havoc on Cam Ward? Can you limit the rushing game of Damian Martinez? Florida fell outside the top 100 in defensive havoc last year. There's nothing that says that they are going to be able to get back in the top 100, especially when you lose Prince Umani-Milan. Now on to the NFL. He led the team in sack rate. He had 17 quarterback hits. He's gone. And Florida is not going to be able to replicate what he was. Now, 33% of the team's quarterback hits do return, but those come from secondary players last year that were on blitz downs. It had nothing to do with the defensive front seven. So, translation, Florida cannot produce any havoc whatsoever out of the defensive front. That's going to allow Cam Ward potentially some wiggle room to make mistakes and Florida not capitalize on it. The Florida defensive front is not going to be able to stop Damian Martinez from keeping Miami into standard downs. And for that reason, Miami money line was the play. But the fact that Mertz has just been so elite, and the place to attack Miami is going to be a corner that grades out poorly in every situation, Florida can make a comeback here. So my position is Miami money line. I do think they win the game, but I am absolutely coming back on Florida if I can get it at a touchdown.
My future headline: Cam crumbles in the swamp. Mistake-free Mertz prevails. By the way, Princely, he's at Ole Miss now. DK,
yeah,
DK is the wide receiver. Calling him Dyke, dropping Dyke 10 times.
Sorry.
But from Wisconsin, keep an eye on another Badger at wide receiver from Arizona State who could make an impact. But should be a really fun one with a lot of drama. All right, let's move on to the final marquee game. Another really good one with potential playoff implications. Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Texas A&M 3-point favorite. Total down to 46.5. Under's taking money. A&M's taking money. You know my position on this. I talked about it all summer. Yep. I thought A&M was going to win. I said A&M was the side. I think how you boil this game down to two things. I think Texas, well, let's say three things. One, Texas A&M is going to be a much more serious team under Mike Elko. Huge coaching upgrade. That's why I'm a lot higher on A&M than the market, or at least was before A&M keeps taking money. Two, Notre Dame's offensive line problem. 6 career starts on that offensive line, headed to College Station for their, a lot of their first collegiate action against a defensive line that's filled with Sunday players. And so I ultimately think that'll be the difference. The Texas A&M offense definitely has questions. Like, their offensive line has questions, not as many as Notre Dame. And the Notre Dame defense is really good. The secondary is really good. The defensive line is really good. They have a really good, linebacker as well. Like, it's a really good defense. This should be a rock fight. The wild card here is Elko versus Leonard. They were at Duke together last year. Who has the edge? Quarterback has seen Elko's defenses in practice over and over again. Coach knows the quarterback's tendencies, his weaknesses, his strength. What he wants to do. Elko in his press conference said, look, it's Leonard who has the advantage. He's seen my defenses a lot. Obviously, he's going to say that. I think it tends to favor the coach. But I think A&M's a side to me. I need under 3, though. Definitely will be in my round robin. That's my small favorite anchor. I'm leaning under, and I have a new segment for the show. It's in the kind of, if you watch some of our live stuff in the NFL, we have a segment with Chad Millman. who does convince me. I'm going to do one bet a week that I kind of like that you bet, and I want you to convince me, and I'm going to bet it. And I'm going to have a whiteboard. I'm going to keep track of one a week. I think that one this week for you to convince me, A&M, Notre Dame first half under 23.5. I think I'm going to join you there. Because I think both teams with their offensive line questions, like A&M has offensive line questions. Notre Dame definitely does. They're going against two really good defensive lines, two really good talented secondaries. Hey, this is a huge game, right? First game of the year. Texas A&M also a new offensive scheme. Let's not make a mistake. And I think that both of these teams are going to feel each other out, let the offensive lines ease into the game. So I think this is going to start out very, very conservative. So I think I prefer the first half under to the full game under, especially now that that's come down. So do you want to add some insight to convince me?
Yeah, I mean, once I wrote this game up for action, it'll be out at the end of this week, and it'll have all the stats and the names that you're going to need to make this bet here. I think we need to start off by saying how unbelievable it is that Mike Elko has such a a fingerprint on everything in this game. I mean, Riley Leonard played for Elko last year. Elko coached Duke against Notre Dame last year. Now, why is that important? Because Elko brought all his assistants, right? I'm sure those files that they have on the game plan for Notre Dame, they don't have any dust on them. So Elko and all of his assistants, are in College Station. That's going to be a big deal here. So, I mean, Mike Elko himself was a defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So there's just so much here that's in favor of Texas A&M from that perspective in terms of shutting down the Notre Dame offense. And when you lose tackles like Joe Alt and Blake Fisher to the NFL, Marcus Freeman was kind of in a bind. He had highly touted redshirt freshman Charles Jagusa penciled in at left tackle, and he was going to be the anchor of that offensive line. He has a season-ending injury a couple of weeks ago. The tackle depth chart now is scary. Emil Wagner was a great run blocker, poor pass blocking grades. But true freshman Anthony Knapp was just at prom a couple months ago. Dude was literally at prom, and now he's starting at tackle against maybe the fiercest Texas A&M defensive line out there. So, Knapp was recruited as an interior line. That's the thing that gets me here stuck. This is the guy that's filling in at tackle. He was recruited as an interior offensive lineman. He was considered the 8th best in the recruiting circles. Now he gets the hot spot there. You would expect they would want to protect Riley Leonard coming back from a foot injury. But the problem is when all you run is outside zone with Mike Denbrock, the new offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, the tackles are going to get crashed. The defensive ends are going to be on top of whatever running back is there for zone read, and it's going to be Riley Leonard on the ground. And that is a bad situation for Notre Dame here. Now, Texas A&M, we talked about this on other formats. Nick Skirton comes in from Purdue, 28 hurries, 8 sacks. Jamar Turner's on the inside, creating 35 pressures from the interior is crazy. That's how good this Texas A&M line is. So I think the one issue that I have, and Notre Dame's just as good on the interior too. Notre Dame's the issue that I have comes on the Texas A&M offense. I would join you on taking Texas A&M, but there's a couple of things where it's like, I think Notre Dame can shut down Texas A&M for quite a while too. As potent as Texas A&M's line is, the interior of Howard Cross III and Riley Mills combined for 63 pressures and 57 stops from the interior. These aren't even edge players. And Connor Wiegman makes me a little bit nervous running the Kansas State offensive playbook that offensive coordinator Colin Optimus Klein is going to call here. The injury to Ruben Owens really kind of stunts that Kansas State playbook because everything Kleiman does at Kansas State is a 2-back set, and sometimes Will Howard is running the ball. Every quarterback there runs the ball. Connor Wiegman has no history of designed runs, no history of being able to be mobile outside the pocket. Really, their backup quarterback, Marcel Reed in there, he's more the better fit here, but Connor Wiegman's going to be the quarterback. It's just sort of a weird fit for Colin Klein's offense. So we'll see how that plays out. And that's the thing about the first half bet, Stuck. These are two extremely smart head coaches that are defensive minded. They're going to go to the locker room and make adjustments at halftime, and I expect points to get up on the board. I expect schemes to change. I mean, these are truly two of the smartest coaching staffs in college football. The adjustments will be made. Points are probably going to get up on the board. It's going to be a brand new ball game in the second half. So give me the first half under while these two teams are just kind of in a jab match and a boxing match trying to feel each other out.
All right, I'm riding with you. First one of the year of riding one of Colin's bets from each podcast. And then if I lose, I'd get to blame him the next week. So it's fine.
There you go.
All right, let's move on to Sunday night for some Sunday night football. USC takes on LSU in lovely Las Vegas. LSU's a 6.5-point favorite here. Excuse me, LSU's a 4.5-point favorite. The number was at 6.5 total. It's ticked down a bit to 64.5. Scary, but I actually lean under. I don't think I'll play it though. Fast track with questions on defense, but both teams did bring in new coordinators. Very similar teams in that they both lost NFL quarterbacks to the first round of the NFL draft. They both lost 2 wide receivers to the NFL draft, and they both hope a new defensive coordinator can help fix their respective defenses. LSU also has questions on the defensive line. They lost last year's defense, which was so bad. They lost Spates at linebacker and 3 defensive linemen to the NFL. And then obviously they still have questions in the secondary. LSU allowed over 45 points per game versus the 4 ranked opponents they faced last year. Special teams also a question. The intangibles here favor USC, I think. Location in Vegas, better special teams. And I also think the USC defensive improvements in the summer were much better than LSU's, especially on the back end. I love a lot of the secondary pieces that they brought in. I trust the USC secondary much more than the LSU unit at this time. I'm a big Miller Moss guy. We were on him in the bowl last year. Talented offense, Lincoln Riley running it. Now I think with Lynn in town as his defensive coordinator, you brought in Vance, Nicholson, the Arnolds, Humphrey, and Ramsey from UCLA. I like the additions. I like the whole staff of the defensive staff. So I like USC catching the points here. I have this slightly under a field goal. I think this is like probably last team with the ball wins.
Yeah.
By the way, I feel bad. Every year it feels like I bet against LSU too much, and I'm never on them in the futures market. My LSU fans are some of my favorite people in the world. I remember a bunch of them came up to Stagger In one weekend. They all had they gave my wife a Burrow jersey, a LSU Burrow. It was we were all cheering for them and something. Friends with a lot of them. So I wish I could have touted LSU for something in the off season. But I'll bet you eventually this year, but not on Sunday. Let's say.
I mean, I don't hate LSU. I took them on their conference win total over. I mean, I still like them. I just don't like them in this game. I think this is more about how much I love USC and what I think their ceiling could be. Both of these teams hired defensive coordinators over the offseason, and they both desperately needed to. Lincoln Riley's does not pay attention to the defensive side of the ball, never has at any stop that he's ever been at. And then LSU, holy cow. 6 of their 8 SEC opponents scored at least 30 points. So both of them needed changes. And USC, in my opinion, is the one that made the best change. Now, Danton Lynn comes over from UCLA. He had an immediate impact for the Bruins. It's like people forgot that Chip Kelly had Jerry Azanaro there, and they were 125th against the rush. It's like people forgot just how bad that UCLA defense was until Danton Lynn came in-house. Now, I keep going back to this. I know Danton Lynn was not a part of the official bowl roster for USC when they played in the Holiday Bowl, but he was videoed walking into practices every single day. The result, a USC defense that missed 141 tackles throughout the season only missed 6 in that bowl game. So I was extremely impressed with the changes. And Lincoln Riley even said it at Big Ten Media Day that was the best defensive effort he's seen. Not all year. He said years. I was like, wow. All-star coaching staff. When you can go out and get your linebackers coach to be Matt Entz, who was a head coach at North Dakota State, how does that happen? I mean, it's not hard to sell LA and coach at USC, but that is something. UCLA under Danton Lynn jumped to 7th in defensive havoc. We'll see in the NFL, Latu Latu, and produced the best pass rush in all of FBS. Also in the back end, UCLA was 12th in coverage grading, and it was just a massive lift from about 90th to 14th in defensive finishing drives. Just couldn't get points on the board against UCLA when you got into scoring position. It was such a massive Danton Lynn coming from the Ravens. These Ravens assistants that are coming into college they're dominating opposing offenses. It's the one NFL to college transition that always needs to be looked at. Now LSU, completely different story. I didn't understand this hire. I still don't get it, and I don't think it's going to play out well for them. LSU's defense was horrific, as stated, what they did in SEC games last year. They went out and got Blake Baker of Missouri as if this was going to upgrade this defense. Baker was great at producing havoc. I know Missouri was top 20 in havoc. They were top 20 in stopping the rush. They were not good against opponent passing games or against explosives whatsoever. Missouri finished 104th in defensive finishing drives. And for those of you that don't know, that's how many points do you get after you cross the 40-yard line. Every team that faced Missouri and crossed the 40-yard line averaged 4.6 points per trip. That's unacceptable. But now he is the defensive coordinator at LSU, and I just don't see a lift in stopping explosives and allowing teams to get points up on the board. As far as USC and the offense goes, Miller Moss won the starting job. Quarterback coach was quoted as saying he won the job over Jaden Mava coming in from UNLV because of his ability to protect the ball. His protection of the ball was paramount. That is big against LSU, especially if Blake Baker is able to reproduce that havoc that he had at Missouri. Now, USC is going to field one of the top offensive lines in the Big Ten. I believe they were 4th or 5th in a lot of the rankings that I saw. And then when you look on the LSU side, Mike Denbrock is gone. He's no longer the offensive coordinator. He's at Notre Dame. So Brian Kelly, instead of going out and getting a new offensive coordinator, he has co-OCs Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton that were promoted from within. The offense, though, has to change. I mean, it just can't be outside zone from Jaden Daniels and what he would throw downfield. That's gone. It's now Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier is not going to run 20 times a game using inside zone like Jaden Daniels or using outside zone like Jay. It's just not going to happen. Garrett Nussmeier is more about throwing deep. So there's a lot of issues with LSU. They haven't resolved.
And the wide receivers are obviously not going to be as good. I mean, USC also lost to the NFL, but
yeah,
they didn't lose 2 in the first round, the caliber that LSU lost, and you're losing Daniels' legs. Yeah. So while the offensive line is really good, the offense is definitely going to take a step back, and I don't think the defense can overcome with that drop off with some of its improvements. They'll definitely be better, but I think the USC defense has improved more.
Let me say this about the total, because boy, there's a love fest with that over, and I don't think it's done. Stuck. I think, you know what? Everybody Sunday, they don't have to work on Monday. Everybody's going to be laying out their pool, enjoying their last weekend of bright sunshine, and they're going to say, these two teams have terrible defenses. We got to take the over. I don't know if this thing's going to stop at 64.5. I don't know where it's going to stop, but once I get to about 67, let me tell you how this thing goes under. If D'Anton Lynn can simply take this USC defense that ranked outside the top 120 in every single statistical category, if he can get them to line up correctly, if he can get them to take the proper angles for tackles, if he can get one-on-one tackles, and he can get 11 helmets flying to the football, USC can potentially finish 90th or 80th in all these defensive metrics. To me, that equals an extra 4 stops per game, maybe some 3-and-outs from a USC defense. We can all dream. So I think if D'Anton Lynn simply returns to fundamentals with this team, this game can go under. Absolutely can go under. So I'm going to play the side on USC, and I'm going to sit on this steam and watch it, and maybe a little underplay will come in at some point.
I agree with you. Are we doing a recap episode this weekend? Right on Sunday? Yeah, we are.
Yeah, if we do, you want to do Florida State BC then?
Yeah, let's do Florida State BC. I will just say, I don't know why someone decided to hit the market today. Like at 15, that thing was going down and down and down, and then someone had to whack it. Why couldn't you wait to see if it got to 14? It was headed there.
Yep.
But I will just say it's getting too low, especially if it got to 14. I would have played Florida State, but it goes against all these different trends. Like BC hasn't played yet. Teams, I mean, there's some, if you just look at conference games, so teams playing in week 1 for the first time against a conference opponent that already played in week 0, 14-3 against the spread. And teams that are favored by over a touchdown, like Florida State in this spot after playing week 0, 9-21 against the spread. And they got to come across. They have a couple extra days in Georgia Tech, but just keep that in mind. But I do think the hate's gone a little too far, but Florida State definitely has questions. We'll break that down on Sunday. Let's move on to the rundown. We'll go through these games quick. We'll do like a minute or 2 each. Colorado State, Texas. This line's coming down. I disagree with the move. I'm hoping for a 31 on Texas. I know Michigan's on deck, which is like the wrench, but yeah, you're going to get Arch Manning, and this team is top 10 recruiting and transfer. Like their depth's better than Colorado State's. They're way better than Colorado State's backup. Colorado State lost a cornerback to the NFL, who just signed with the Commanders. They have a Navy transfer starting at corner. They lost their top pass rusher, Kamara. They also, what's his name? Gatkuth is out for this game. Their other best defensive linemen, Pierre and Kelly, are gone. Their defensive line is bleak. Their weapons around Horton are bleak. Their offensive line, you got a Utah Tech transfer starting, right tackle moving to right guard, a new right tackle. Questions. D-line, huge step back. Linebackers are bad. Their safeties are good. That's about it. And by the way, Texas, which lost 5 skill positions in the NFL and 2 defensive linemen. That's one of the biggest questions, defensive linemen. Colorado State's not taking advantage of that. They don't run the ball. The team bottom 10 rush attempts per game, top 10 seconds per play. That's bad as a big underdog. I think Texas trucks them. Just because, look, their running backs have injuries. They're going to come out and throw all over this Colorado State team who has no corners. This Navy corner is going to get roasted, and they can't get pressure. And then Colorado State, just they're not the team that's going to be running and they're with their offensive line issues. I think Colorado State gets crushed. You?
Yeah, Colorado State is still not fielding the offensive line that Jay Norvell wants. They're better. I mean, I think off the record, it would be off the record. It means I can't say it here. Let's just say there was not any happiness about the offensive line that was inherited when Jay Norvell got there. It is getting better, but it's still not what it needs to be. And I think the loss of Justice Ross Simmons over to Syracuse really takes a big piece of this offense out, especially from an explosive perspective. The love in the market here is banging on against Texas because of what Colorado State did against Colorado in the passing game, and because of what Texas cannot do in the secondary against a team like Washington. All other intangibles in this game, it's a Texas domination. It's a game that I make it 33, 34. I mean, at 31, you're just going to see a massive buy on Texas, but I don't think it's going to get there. I agree with you. I think Texas can name it here, but they are going to Michigan the next week. So it's one of those things where if I was going to play Texas, I would veer to the first half, because if they get a comfortable, it's stuck. You know how these coaches work, and Sark comes from the tree of Saban. I get a 3-possession lead. I'm sitting on the ball. Although now I'm kind of wondering.
And then you have running back issues. So yeah,
right. How does Texas do that with no running backs? I don't know how they sit on the ball with no running backs. But I mean, I think if you're going to play, Texas first half is the play.
Yeah, it's Texas or nothing there for me. Might end up adding them. Maybe I'll just have a huge first round card and then hope the gods think I'm due. Boise State, Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern catching 13. Give me 14, please. That's all I want in this game. I like Georgia Southern. Boise State hype. I think you like Boise State the first half, maybe. I'll get your thoughts in a sec. But the Boise State hype, like, going to the playoff, you're hearing a lot of noise. You got Oregon next week. This is a tricky spot. And by the way, the weather, it's going to be hot and humid. Yes. That could wear on Boise late in the game. Strength of the Georgia Southern D is their interior and their linebackers, Watson, Trent, and their defensive line is pretty good. So what can they do? At least have a shot at slowing down Genty in that running attack, because you can attack Georgia Southern secondary. Not fully sold on Boise's passing attack yet. Cable's is a stud, but there's some other questions. And no more Bryn, no more Davis Bryn for Georgia Southern's a positive. They led the nation in turnovers last year. You just give the ball away. I don't know why French is the starter. I would have went in different directions, but you might see some other guys at quarterback. And I think that they can have some success with their air raid against this Boise State. This Boise State defense returns everyone, but it's not like they were outstanding last year. So there's still some questions. I know Helton's terrible as a dog, but it's a great spot to get Georgia Southern, especially if we can get 2 touchdowns. Drive that up. Someone drive that line up.
Well, I still don't understand how Spencer Danielson was promoted when the defense was the big problem last year, right? And what happens in this offseason? Spencer Danielson decides, well, I'm going to take Eric Shenander and promote him to defensive coordinator. Let me remind everybody who Eric Shenander is, right? He ran the 3-4 for Scott Frost at UCF and at Nebraska. He likes to run an extremely aggressive 3-4, lots of blitz, and he fails at that blitz. It's one of the lowest success rates and highest blitz rates in college football, and it never gets home. And he doesn't let his foot off the pedal. So Eric Shenander. That's
not how you want to defend this Georgia Southern.
And then you get into the 92 degrees that it's supposed to be at kickoff here at 3 p.m. in Statesboro. Listen, I had somebody tell me one time, like, oh, well, it gets to be 90 degrees in Boise. Guy, it's 70% humidity. It is choke out 92 degrees. If you haven't been to the deep south where this is, you don't have any clue what's going on. Boise State's playing Oregon the following week. Again, I think if you can get 14, you can get 14 and a half, the hook on a 3-possession game. You got to play it here. I mean, I have no love for Georgia Southern. I really don't. And I don't know what they're going to do as far as stopping Ashton Genty. I would potentially look at Ashton Jeanty overs on his rushing because that is going to work, and Georgia Southern's not going to be able to stop that. But man, this Boise State defense, no thanks, all year, all year.
I actually don't mind the Georgia Southern run day. I think they can do enough up front just to not get just gashed for huge yardage every single time he touches the ball. I think they have enough horses up front. But let's move on. Western Kentucky at Alabama. Western Kentucky is a 33-ish point underdog here at Alabama. A lot of change with Alabama. New staff. This is a team that, lost 5 all SEC defenders. So they're young at wide receiver. Offensive tackle, still a bit of a question. Total here, 59.5, by the way. Really intriguing little nuggets for this game. We're talking about the other Helton, by the way. We just talked about one Helton. Now the other Helton who coaches Western Kentucky. TJ Finley is going to start for Western Kentucky, not Connor Beltkamp. TJ Finley was at Auburn, failed, he's played at Alabama before. And then he went to Texas State, had a huge year. A lot of that was scheme driven, but he was definitely better. And he faced Kane Womack's South Alabama defense and carved them apart. Just carved them up. Kane Womack now is the defensive coordinator for Alabama. Also, there's some staff on Alabama that used to coach under Helton and knows his offense really well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of familiarity across the board here. The Western Kentucky D could be bad. Yeah. They lost a lot, and I don't like a lot of the pieces they brought in. They lost 63-10 to Ohio State last year. So that scares me. I remember watching that game. Maybe I could be talked into like Western Kentucky second half or live if they're down big. Because I think that they can just, Alabama will probably park the bus and then their offense can move it. Alabama's still young at corner trying to figure that out. Probably pass for me. Anything there?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to play something, which I probably will, it'd be an Alabama team total in the first half. I know that's extremely exotic, but there are books out there that have it. And the reason behind that is Western Kentucky went out and got 6 transfers for their secondary. Ooh. I mean, for this Kalen DeBoer offense and Jalen Milroe, you can expect in the first half, they're going to try to get something going here to get some points up on the board. I don't like a total of 59.5 for the full game because 59 is such a key number. I make it 53. Not sure what Western Kentucky is going to be able to score on this Alabama defense. And I don't think the Kalen DeBoer wants to go out and rock some team for 55-0 starting off the first game of the season. So I do like the first half. I think Alabama will be full speed. We'll get to see Jalen Milroe do his thing until they decide to sit him. So I do like Alabama scoring points in the first half. I just cannot get over Western Kentucky getting all those transfers coming in. So that would be the look for me. But the big question is, does Alabama have overlook to South Florida in week 2, right? Because how big of a game was that last year?
Yeah, well, hopefully it looks a little better than it did last year in Tampa. Fresno at Michigan. My thoughts on Michigan. Lower than the market on them. Or new quarterback. It's probably going to be Alex Orji. I would assume you're going to see Davis Warren as well. But brand new staff, brand new offensive line. A lot of change on D. I also think the D scheme and just their preparation and their adjustments, not having Minter there, big step back. Texas on deck. Really weird spots. Like we were national champions, all of this change, some stuff going on off the field. I think they just want to get some reps, not show too much with this new offense. And Fresno State has some juice. Running back at Sherrod, Mikey Keene at quarterback, have some decent weapons. Offensive line is a concern. And they did lose a corner and a linebacker to the NFL, but they did get one cornerback from injury. Should be okay there. It's not like Michigan's pass catchers are very scary. But I think Fresno could do enough. 21 or better. I like them here in a tough spot for Michigan, and I expect this to be a lower scoring game. So 3 touchdowns or more, even more valuable. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I did not dock. I docked Fresno State only a half point when Tedford announced his retirement. This is the same coaching staff that was coached the bowl, Tim Skipper at the interim. They have a pretty vicious defense from a Mountain West perspective. So really it's a battle of Michigan having overlooked to Texas. They don't want to expose their playbook. But the problem is their playbook right now is like 8 rushing concepts. So maybe the Wolverines only show 2 or 3 of them. It's going to be a very vanilla game for Michigan in that aspect. It's not, Harbaugh's not there. They're not going to play bully ball. I don't think Sharon Moore is going to have a little bit of a different philosophy here. So we'll keep our eyes on that. But I agree with you. I think Fresno at anything 21.5 is worth a look.
Look out for Corey Foreman, by the way, the USC transfer, who, do you want to talk about Big Ten versus he'll look like he belongs. He's listed as or on the depth chart. We'll see if they can get him to live up to his potential. UCLA, Hawaii fits that week 0 versus week 1 trend. Hawaii was here last year against Stanford. I think I had about 10 points of CLA. And then they got boat race after playing week 0 against the Stanford team that was better prepared and just ran them out. Same thing here. Hawaii looked awful last week against Delaware State. There was some weather. Traeger was just trying to set like a record for most air yards. I saw a tweet that said that. He was just chucking it downfield in the wind. But there's no McBride at wide receiver. They really miss him.
Yep.
UCLA has been taking a bit of money here on a 2-touchdown favorite. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, they're taking money because of how poor Hawaii looked. And listen, I laid the second Deshaun Foster walked off that stage at Big Ten Media Days. I laid into Hawaii, and I also laid into their money line. And at the time, I didn't know Stephen McBride wouldn't be available. It was said on the telecast last week that Stephen McBride has an eligibility issue with the NCAA, and it's going to be for an extended period. So it doesn't look like they're going to have their best their best wide receiver. But Phil Ashlock is still there, but he's not as explosive, still really explosive. It's still good, but I mean, they're missing a huge piece, and now they've got to ramp up their 3rd and 4th wide receiver in the depth chart for Timmy Chang. But yeah, Shager was just out there throwing 60-yard bombs in the rain, and 15% drop rate. I think I tweeted about that last year. There's like a 6.5% drop rate for Hawaii during the Delaware State game. It was a 15% drop rate. So that was a little disheartening, and they could not convert a 3rd and 1 for their life. The defense let Delaware State drive up and down the field in the second half. What the hell am I watching here? Because UCLA is going to do one thing with Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator and with Deshaun Foster as the head coach. They're just going to run the ball like crazy, which should be interesting because, J. Michael Sturdivant's there, and he is the best weapon on this UCLA offense, but it sounds like this is a scheme that's going to completely run the ball. So it's an interesting watch. I'm not backing off my Hawaii number that I have. I'm just going to stick with it, despite McBride not being there, despite such a terrible look against Delaware State. Just going to have to eat it here because the drops have to get cleaned up. Shager's got to be a little bit more accurate, a little bit more patient with his wide receivers.
The defense also is disappointing given the level of opponent. Wyoming at Arizona State, a late night game Saturday. New quarterbacks here. Svoboda, the Josh Allen clone, takes over. Maybe you get a more aggressive offense for Wyoming. Their running back Whaley is out. You're going to have the North Carolina transfer Jones, who played defense last year, be the starting running back. Apparently he's got a lot of juice. It's an internal hire, by the way. And with Jay Salvell. Wyoming's roster, a lot of experience. They lost their stud left tackle, Crum. That's a big loss. It's one of 2 redshirt freshmen that's going to be taking over at left tackle. That's something to watch. They did lose their top 2 wide receivers and tight end, and obviously Whaley's out at running back. But the rest of the offensive line should be good. Defensively, almost everyone from the 2 deep is back, but they got to replace one very good linebacker in Gibbs and then one cornerback spot. Both their safeties, White and Eckler, are very, very good. So one, left tackle, one linebacker spot, CB2, and then the wide receivers. Like, can they open it up with this wide receiver group? Not really sure. Interesting nuggets for this game. Salvell, when he was, he killed Arroyo. When Arroyo was OC at UNLV in 2020, Salvell just dominated him in every possible way.
Who didn't?
Yeah, seriously. Another interesting thing is that the new offensive coordinator in Wyoming was the offensive coordinator at Michigan State last year, where Sam Leavitt, the Michigan State transfer, won the job for Arizona State. So he has a lot of familiarity with Leavitt's strengths and weaknesses. O-line's still a big question for Arizona State, especially left tackle, and they're dealing with injuries again. This is a team that tons and tons of injuries last year, using different guys every single week. They lost Badger at wide receiver, went to Florida. Brown, the USC transfers, he's also out. Prince Dorm about the D end, I think he's also out. This defense is just, you want to talk about uncertainty? It's just transfers. 10 on the 2 deep. Cornerback, biggest question. So can Wyoming take advantage? I'm not really sure. Scatabo back in the backfield. The O-line, it's just a mess here, which I think is still going to hold them back. interesting game. And even if you look at that Arizona State team with like the defense last year, it flashed at times. I really liked them. You know, your defensive lineman Mallory, he's now on an NFL roster. Simmons is moving from safety to nickelback. Your other safety, Edmonds, he's on an NFL roster. Your quarterback, Roe Torrance, he made an NFL roster. Your nickel, Clark, where Simmons is moving, he transferred to Notre Dame. Your best pass rusher, he transferred to Colorado. So they definitely lost a lot of talent. So yeah, I don't know. I disagree with this move. I like Wyoming, and I probably might throw them good. A lot of uncertainty here, and some of that staff nuggets, good money line piece, might throw them in the round robin. Any thoughts?
Yeah,
there?
the Sam Levitt call out was that's really good. I saw that too, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. It's like a Elko knowing Riley Leonard really well. I think one thing that is in the back of my mind is at 9 p.m. at kick, it's going to be 95 degrees with 15-mile-an-hour winds. It's shades of the sandstorm that made the game like 6 hours long last year till like 3 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully we don't have another event like that. If this game was played in Laradice and Harrison Whaley was there, this would be a money line play without, I mean, you and I'd be fighting over who got the money line here. So the number I project is at 5, and I've made adjustments for Harrison Whaley not being there by a half point. Evan Svoboda kind of needed him as running mate for the zone read that they're going to run from Sauvel. So, we'll see how that all plays out. But the number to me is way too high. I think people are going to focus on some of the losses, and the number is going to go the wrong way. And I think it's going to make a good opportunity to bet Wyoming. A book did pop an hour before we started recording. A book did pop 7.5. Let's see how high that can get before we dive in.
Last game here in the rundown, UNLV at Houston. UNLV quarterback uncertainty. They got the oars up there. You got Friel, and you got 2 FCS transfers. Malik Williams from Campbell. Malik Williams, he's from Campbell. And then Sluka from Holy Cross. Thomas back at running back. You got 2 new guards, but the offensive line is huge. Ricky White, stud wide receiver. The D's now more talented on the back end. I think they upgraded the losses there. They got some Arkansas guys, too, that are on that defense.
Yep.
Brendan Marino should be electric. Comes down to just, can the quarterback be the guy? After Maeva transferred to USC. Houston, brand new. Willie Fritz comes in, and he does have Donovan Smith back at quarterback, but they lost their top 2 receivers. The offensive line is a mess. You got 1 starter back at left guard, 3 inexperienced guys, 1 bad Colorado transfer at left tackle. That's your O-line. The new DC, Shield Wood, comes with Fritz, moving to a 3-4D. You got 1 safety back, and the rest transfers. A couple from Tulane. That is a brand new defense across the board. A lot of uncertainty here. Houston, small home favorite, under a field goal. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the number's gone way too far. And I love UNLV. I think they're going to win the Mountain West. Malik Daniels. The 2 quarterbacks at the Sluka, they were able to get out of Holy Cross and out of Campbell. I mean, listen, we used to bet in 2021, we rode Campbell for the first 4 games of the season. Malik Williams is that guy. The problem is this number should be more like 6. Not down in this range right here. And I know there's a lot of hate in the market for Houston right now, but who's stopping Donovan Smith when he's in red zone situations, when he's doing quarterback keeper at the goal line? It's just not going to happen by anybody that's on this UNLV defense. And you have to think that what Houston has on their defense from a talent perspective is enough to keep up with 2 quarterbacks that are coming from the FCS range. So I think the number has gone way too far. So I have not convinced myself to play Houston yet. I do have a huge love fest with UNLV this year. Just can't get there on this number right now. But I'm definitely watching this game because I want to see who Barry Odom plays the most. Speaking of Arkansas kids, he's here in Arkansas all the time. My daughter goes to a high school that Gus Malzahn used to coach at, and Barry Odom is pulling recruits out of high schools here in town. So the Arkansas connections are still strong. He's got Jalen Catalon back there. He used to be the locker room leader for the Razorbacks a couple of years ago. So, this is, I love this UNLV team, but this number has gone way too far.
All right, good stuff there. Before we get to some trash, let's do a minute on FC yes or no. We have another FCS team, the number 1 team in the country, back-to-back national title. The back-to-back national champions at the FCS level. The last time they lost a game was, I believe, by 3 a couple of years ago at Iowa. They will take on Oklahoma State. It's about a 10-point favorite. The South Dakota State team, they did lose a number of contributors on the offensive side of the ball. But they returned their star quarterback. It's the best in the FCS level. It's going to have a shot to play in the NFL. Had a ton of offers, NIL offers to go Power 4, but did not. They have a really good running back that returns. 3 good players in the offensive line, but they lost I think they have 5 players on their offense that signed with NFL rosters. 8 of their top 13 tacklers return as well. I think that this team has just so much. They just know how to win. That round robin piece. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, Oklahoma State dropped to South Alabama last year. There's a lot of narrative out there that Gundy doesn't care about non-conference games. I'm not gonna sit here and speculate whether he cares or not about non-conference games, but I will tell you that after non-conference play was done last year, he completely changed all the run concepts for Ollie Gordon. It's almost as if the coaching staff went in before conference play started and decided to change everything that they were doing on the offensive side. So are you going to tinker with this offense? Are you going to tinker with your defense with South Dakota State, FCS national champions, and Arkansas on deck? It's not a good spot for Oklahoma State whatsoever. There's definitely an overlook. Alan Bowman told me in Las Vegas at Big 12 Media Days that Arkansas was the biggest game on the schedule. I said, how is that the biggest game when you're competing for the Big 12? He said, because it's SEC level talent. It's our neighbor next door. It's recruiting. It'll be the biggest game that we have on our schedule from the fact of we are beating SEC level talent. So,
and think about how big this, but on the flip side, think about how big this is for the FCS team that's won the national title going to a ranked team in FBS. This is probably their biggest game of the season,
right.
Outside of the national title. So I think you get everything you got from from South Dakota State. They won't be scared.
And the other thing that was whispered in my ear is that Dazon Stribling is going to be an absolute animal this year because he's going to get one-on-one coverage there for Oklahoma State, but he will not be used that much in this game because they're saving him for Arkansas. So there is a lot here for Gundy to deal with as far as I got to deal with an FCS national champion. I've got overlooked to an SEC school the next week. It's a pretty little sweet spot here for South Dakota State to fall into.
All right. Let's have some fun before we get out of here. We're really back. It's time for some trash, baby.
How's there not a waste management bowl? I still haven't figured that out.
I gotta get my hat on right. Let's do some trash. So I go through these. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can see you. I can see you too.
I'll go through these quick. One minute each. You just say yes or no and why you agree. Virginia Tech at Vandy, baby. All I want is 14. We're betting on Vandy and Pavia and the Ponzi scheme and this new staff. Virginia Tech coming in with all this hype, going down to Nashville. It's gonna be storming. This game's gonna go super slow. Brand new offense for Vanderbilt. It's gonna be the New Mexico State offense. It's gonna be just a lot of run, 2 tight ends. This is basically betting on a service academy. And they're gonna be shifting offensive linemen. You got a strong side, a swing side, a weak. It's gonna be crazy to watch. Virginia Tech is not gonna be prepared. The way you want to attack this Virginia Tech defense is to run against them. This total's come down 7 points. The line keeps going up for the favorite. Give me a new service academy Vandy. This is how Vandy should play. They're overmatched. They lost to every FBS team last year, every Power 4 team by double digits. Get a gimmick. That's what it's going to be, and it's going to be most effective early on. Weather will only help. This will be the best version of Vandy you get. The defense still has major issues. The offensive line still has major issues. So you want to play gimmicky. They lost their top 3 receivers. I get it. There's questions. But this Va Tech team, I think, comes in just a bit overvalued this season. This is a team that I know they finished strong last year, but they beat Pitt, that corpse of Pitt last year. Wake and Kern's first start. BC and Jerkovic's Pitt was Jerkovic's last start ever. Cuse, BC, UVA, and then a dead Tulane team in the bowl who didn't even get off the bus. They lost to FSU, Ville, and NC State 108-48. Let's cool our jets. Vandy secondary, specifically at corner. Good safeties, Wright and Taylor, but corner, big question. Drones, does he have the accuracy to take advantage in weather? I'm betting no. Vandy defensive line improved. A lot of running in this game. Few possessions. Gimmicks for New Mexico State. Pavia and the Ponzi. Are you in or out?
I'm out. First half under. No.
14, baby. Someone just give it to me. It's going to get there, by the way. Just wait. I'm waiting on it. Eastern Michigan at UMass. I kind of liked UMass, but I told you this months ago. What's going to be the difference? Special teams. What happened last year? I know UMass choked that game away. Hidden yards. Eastern Michigan, 200 more hidden yards on special teams. Might happen again. Pass.
UMass. That was a luck box win by Eastern Michigan. 4 turnovers. They got beat in the box score. UMass has all their players back. It's revenge.
Georgia State, Georgia Tech. We're going Georgia State here. Plus 21.5 against Georgia Tech. A couple reasons why. Georgia Tech is a service academy. They're still a service academy. They're running the triple option out of shotgun. What do you do when service academies are laying over 21? You fade the hell out of them. There was 7 possessions in that game. Was there 8? However many possessions there were in that game against Florida State. The fewest since 2020. Before that, the fewest was an Army-Navy game. This game will be slow. Georgia State's brand new. Georgia Tech's coming back from Ireland after a huge win. They have to play on Saturday. Florida State at least gets Monday. Not going to know what to expect with Georgia State. Some element of surprise. They're only 2 miles from campus here. It's not a great home field advantage. Brent Key, he has Service Academy numbers. 12-3 against the spread as an underdog. You know what he is as a favorite? 1-4 against the spread. Lost 4 of the 5 outright, all at home, including as a 21-point favorite against Bowling Green. Give me the brand new Georgia State Panthers. In or out?
Out. The number's way too high. Should be 16. It is a.
So you're in.
I'm sorry.
So you're in. You're not in. You make it 16.
No. Here, no. It's first half under all the way. It's first. I mean, they just came back. They have Syracuse on deck. Georgia Tech's not going to show up here. They're not going to show anything. But the problem, Sug, is does Georgia State even have a coach? Sean Elliott's not there anymore.
Hey, what did I tell you? By the way, for what it's worth, their defensive coordinator was the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech last year. And their new head coach, who I really like, McGee, was at Georgia. And for the past 5 years, running back, I expect them to go slow. This game will be played slower. He scouted Georgia Tech they play every year. So they've been able, while Georgia Tech had to go play Florida State, they've been preparing for this game, and they already had scouts and are familiar with Georgia Tech. Panthers.
I'm going under first half under. I'm actually putting it in the app right now, and I'm betting it right now under.
Sam Houston State at Rice. Favorite bet of the weekend. Double digits. Eat 'em up, Cats. Quarterback improved. Wide receivers better with injuries. They finally adjusted to FBS transition. Rice, not a great favorite. We'll miss McCaffrey. Eat 'em up, Cats. Agree?
I love Rice, but not here in this spot.
JMU at Charlotte. Charlotte was double-digit dog. Got down to like 6. Then Biff came out and said half his starters are hurt. Shot back up to 9. Who knows? That's pure pass for me.
He could.
I just wanted to mention Biff.
He didn't have any sleeves when he made that announcement, so maybe he's not telling the truth.
Miami Northwestern.
Wait, are you believing coaches now? Are you believing everything coaches say?
I think there's something else going on, which is why he brought that up. So I don't know if he's still
true.
Could be something else he's covering for. Why some guys won't be there? I don't know.
Right.
Miami Northwestern. Sorry, Spreadhawks. I actually lean Northwestern.
Yes.
Don't know if I'll play it, but
I will.
Number wise, I lean Northwestern, and I think the Miami defense is going to take a step back, and special teams obviously can't be as good. But curious to see how healthy Gabbert looks. All right, we're not fully done yet. We have a new segment, an old news segment. It's called Nowhere Fast. It's calling on San Diego State overs because the San Diego State Aztecs, under their new head coach, are going to go extremely fast, but they're probably going to go nowhere fast. Colin, San Diego State takes on Texas A&M Commerce. Are you betting the over?
Yes, we are. At open 54.5. It's already floated up to 57.5. These teams are going to be in red zone all day. It's just a matter of can they stick it in. Now, Texas A&M Commerce, if you put their yard total offense from last year into the rankings, they would be about 113th out of 122 teams. So we need Texas A&M Commerce here to step up. But yes, we're taking over on every game.
A&M Commerce played Old Dominion last year. Game finished 10-9. Good luck with that. I'll be sitting on the sidelines. And one thing, Arkansas tomorrow night or tonight when you're listening to this takes on Pine Bluff on ESPNU. Pine Bluff is horrendous. You have to be horrendous to catch 48.5 points against Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks. I think they hired a new offense coordinator from Grambling. They're just going to get like spammed RPOs all day from Grambling. Is Arkansas care? Are we taking Pine Bluff? This game is horrendous. What's going on? Give me one. You got 1 minute. 1 minute.
First half over here all the way. There is a large history of Arkansas and Sam Pittman getting a 35 to 40 point lead in the first half and then only scoring 7 in the second half. He does not believe on running it up against in-state coaches, especially with Pine Bluff. He has a lot of respect there. The only thing that Pittman's got to fight to keep the foot off the pedal is Petrino. His full asshole mode wants to score as many points as possible through every quarter. That's what would screw it up. So I don't want to mess with that. Give me the first half over when Petrino has full access to score as fast and as much as he wants.
All right. And before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. First down. And let's go to Friday night for some Friday night lights. Let's talk a little Temple. Yes, Temple. Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a 42-ish point favorite here. Total is 58. See that big number? Historically, huge favorites in college football. They haven't fared well, but for what it's worth, in week 1, FBS versus FBS matchups, these big favorites have done pretty well. Looking at you, Oklahoma and Ohio State, which is laying even a bigger number against lowly Akron. Reason this number is so high, in Oklahoma, pretty good, but Temple is not. Temple is a mess. They are bottom 5 in returning production. This team has the dreaded oars across the quarterback depth chart. You got Evan Simon, the Rutgers transfer, Boris Brock, the backup from last year. You got a red shirt freshman up there, and Tyler Douglas, because they lost EJ Warner from last year. The offensive line, which I believe gave up 13 sacks in the spring game. You have a freshman left tackle, a sophomore left guard, a sophomore transfer center, a decent senior right guard. That's probably the best thing I could say about the offensive line. And then a freshman right tackle. Left tackle, right tackle, center, 0 career FBS starts. Defense will move to more of a 4-3 base. I expect like 2 tight end sets. Try to run it, but I don't know if their lead back is going to be able to kind of carry the workload. He was pretty small against what should be an excellent Oklahoma defense. I think that's probably the story here. I mean, whenever you're dealing with spreads this large, it is a little tough because it's like, when does Oklahoma decide to pull the plug? Or maybe they're like a Hawaii and the game's 14-14 in the third quarter. I doubt that happens here, but you never know. But I'm assuming that Oklahoma's up big. When do they pull the plug? When do they just put their backups in? When do they just start bleeding the clock? How much do they want to run it up, et cetera, et cetera? Always plays a lot of high variance with totals. It spreads this high. Look, I have here, I would lean Oklahoma. I don't know how Temple scores. So Temple under, team total under. What is it, probably 7.5? You can get over a touchdown. That's the way I would look. This should be a rout. Temple is a mess. I just can't see their offense doing much of anything. What do you see here?
Well, the standard rating area is not going well up at Temple. Their sacks have been cut in half every year. Last year, FBS worst, only 5 takeaways on the season. That is pretty impressive in the wrong way for Temple. Their program's going completely the opposite direction that they need to, and I don't think it's going to get any better. But the question really is, when will Oklahoma take their foot off the pedal? I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, will Oklahoma take their foot off the pedal? This is a team that is making their introductory game into the SEC. I would suspect they want to look pretty good here, put up a score that's really going to open up some eyes. Plus, let's talk about what happened in the bowl game. Jackson Arnold was terrible in his debut as a starter, with Dylan Gabriel gone to Oregon now. That bowl game.
I'm sure you want to boost his confidence up before that brutal schedule.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's our overlook here? Well, we don't really have one. It's Houston in 8 days. So there's no reason to not show anything out of the playbook. This is all about reps, because who else needs reps on this Oklahoma team? The offensive line. 5 new starters that haven't played in a game together. I would assume that they are, Venables was asked, are they going to play the entire game? He didn't give a clear answer. There's every expectation this offensive line needs the snaps, and they're going to play the entire game. And if you need more evidence that possibly they're going to run it up, everybody remember what the score was last year when Venables took on Arkansas State in the opener? 73-0.
Is that the Butch Jones crying game?
Still crying. Yeah, so there's no way I can see. I think the Sooners are going to put Arkansas State on I-40 and just run them all the way back to Jonesboro. So I'm sorry. That's what they did to them last year. I think that's what they're going to do to Temple, except they're going to do it all the way up to Philly. So it looks like bad news for Temple here.
By the way, it is good to be back breaking down a full college football slate. It's good to be back with all of you. I have no peace anymore. Once the college football season started, there's no peace. I don't sleep. I'm constantly watching the board, watching notifications, info, research. There's no peace anymore. There won't be any peace until after the college basketball national title. But when I'm here, I can't be looking at the board, so it's a nice release to be talking some college football. And then obviously once the game's kicked, that to me is my ultimate piece. As crazy as that sounds, but let's move on to the next game here. FAU traveling to Michigan State. Michigan State close to a 2-touchdown favorite here. Line's been bouncing around a bit. Total, believe, is sitting, last I saw, 45.5. A lot of changes on both teams in the offseason. FAU coaching stability year 2, Tom Herman, but the roster was gutted. So they lost a ton, bottom 10 returning production in the country. You're going to have Cam Fancher start at quarterback, the Marshall transfer. I'm not a fan. They lose everything, including their star receiver, Wester, 4 offensive linemen, top 3 receivers, you name it, they lost it. They like the portal hauls they brought in on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not fully sold. Michigan State, meanwhile, wholesale changes, bringing a new staff led by Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. He comes in, brings his posse with him. He brings his offensive coordinator, his offensive line coach, Aiden Childs, a new quarterback, big upgrade there, really talented kid. His center, his tight end. So I think the offensive line, which is a mess last year, they averaged like 2.6 yards per carry. And I think improvement there. Get a good center in. You have a really good offensive line coach coming in, really good offensive coordinator. And the coaching hire is why I bumped Michigan State so much. There are questions. That offensive line outside of center definitely has questions. Who's going to be that alpha to emerge at wide receiver? Definitely questions there, but I think the run game will be better. And, where I think Michigan State's going to be weak, I'm not really sure. Florida Atlantic can take full advantage. And this Michigan State secondary was bad last year, but a lot of injuries. So a lot of guys got some experience. I think they're going to be improved on the back end. Linebacker, probably the strength. Did lose a couple guys in the interior to the portal, which might hurt on the defensive end. But I think this Michigan State team, little too soon to really be like talking about them maybe going to a bowl. Could get in the conversation, but it's a program that's on the rise. Incredible hire. I think Jonathan Smith wants to make a statement here. So I bumped them big for the coaching hire. FAU, big downgrade for the returning production and the quarterback. So I like Michigan State, but you got to get under 2 touchdowns. I will say if it's late and Smith just looks like he's starting to park the bus and Michigan State is up big, I might look to come back on some to maybe middle this. FAU maybe goes to Stark, so I think probably would be the better option at the starter. And Michigan State with a conference game next week maybe doesn't try to keep their foot on the gas. What do you see here? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, the number from the side perspective, I wanted to stay away from because we have so many questions with this Michigan State roster because essentially East Lansing is now turned into Corvallis East. So, we'll have to see what they have, what they can put on the field. Jonathan Smith is an excellent coach. I thought he would have been perfect at a place like Arkansas where they want a power run game. He's going to get them going just like he did Oregon State. And Florida Atlantic, Tom Herman had, I think, the highest experience numbers in the world of any team in FBS last year, completely massively underachieved last year with them. So it's hard to gauge. I made this number in the high single digits. I think SP Plus had this around 12. There's a huge battle going on right now. The 14.5s all got scooped up on Florida Atlantic. 13.5s are getting hit by Michigan State. But if I had to make a bet on this game, I would look at the under. There's a 25% chance of rain in the forecast. Jonathan Smith wants to go to his bread and butter. It's going to be on the ground. And I'm not sure Florida Atlantic is good enough to contribute here, especially with Cam Fancher. He's lost us plenty of money when he was with Marshall. So for me, the look would be the under. I think that is the reason why we've had a tick down in the total. I would assume that would continue to tick down if this forecast gets worse.
Yeah. All right. Something to keep an eye on there. Definitely it's we're not fully in the mix yet, but once college football starts, you're always in weather watching mode for forecasts. So make sure that's something that you do keep in mind. Let's move on to the next game here. Western Michigan. We get some action heading to Madison to take on Wisconsin. Wisconsin's around a 24-point favorite. I think total sitting around 56.5. Western Michigan, some people's darling, preseason darling, sleeper in the MAC. Why? Returning production, which is rare in the MAC these days. when teams are just getting gutted with the portal and through other methods. But Western Michigan brings back a lot from a pretty bad team, if I'm being honest. They were a little better once Wolf took over at quarterback. He's back, the former ODU transfer, really good back in Buckley, 2 really good offensive linemen, bring back everyone on the outside at receiver. So it's a team that has a lot of experience. The defense also has experience, but how much more experience, how much is more experience going to lead to better results? That's my question, because the 2 guys that they did lose, one of them looks really good on the Cowboys, their defensive end. One of them, their cornerback, signed with an NFL team, so they lost 2 of their better players. Their defense still could be very bad. Remember, this is a team that early in the season last year got boat raced by Syracuse and Iowa. I think they lost 49-7 to Syracuse, maybe 41-10 to Iowa, if I'm recalling correctly. So where do they stand now with that added experience in year 2 of Lance Taylor? Wisconsin, it's year 2 of this air raid experiment. Will that work? I'm not sure it does. It's just it seems like it's just such a mismatch for what we know of Wisconsin is, and with where they play and the weather and the Big Ten and their physicality. There are some questions on this roster. They do bring in Tyler Van Dyke. We'll see if, is he healthy? Can he avoid the mistakes? Interior offensive line, they got 2 really good tackles. Bit of a question mark. The defensive end, on the defensive end, linebackers are new. Got 2 really good defensive backs, but the defensive line is a major question for me, especially since they lost one of their stars to injury in Thompson. Can they get pressure? Can Western Michigan control the line of scrimmage, get Buckley going? If I had to pick a side here, I would lean Western Michigan, especially at 24, but I'm just a little hesitant that maybe that returning experience, we just saw them in the MAC, is going to be just completely overmatched here. I guess with Wisconsin, what do you see here?
The Wisconsin offense with Phil Longo, we're going into the second year of this. It was a big question that I had at Media Day for Luke Fickell, which was why, what is going on with the Phil Longo offense? This isn't what I've seen at Ole Miss. This isn't what I've seen at North Carolina. And, it came down to the fact that the skill position players that they had on the outside didn't have the ability to create separation to get those explosive plays going. Now, I haven't heard that they've identified anybody on the outside for TVD to have those explosives. So right now, this Wisconsin offense, based on where they're at, based on this history of running backs that are 270 pounds and then going to dominate the NFL, it's kind of like wearing your pants backwards, like having Phil Longo there trying to run up tempo spread. It just doesn't make any sense. But we're going to see if they can get separation from their skill positions and get some explosive plays, because it was amazing. This Wisconsin team was top 10 in havoc allowed. They were so disciplined. They didn't make any mistakes. But at the same time, they were like bottom 10 in explosives. It was the weirdest thing that I saw on the stat sheet. So it's really out for question whether they can look explosive and create chunk plays. As far as the Western Michigan side goes, I mean, you mentioned it. These directional schools from the MAC, when they go up against the Big Ten and the ACC, it's disaster, complete disaster. And the hesitation that I have is Walt Bellett, offensive coordinator for Western Michigan. I know the expectations are high, and you can see it in the market. When this number gets to 24, there's been a scoop up on the Broncos here because of all the experience that they return. But at the same time, this is an offensive coordinator that is a complete stay away from me when it comes to my money, because when he was at Florida State, he was essentially ran out of town, out of the coaching room. He gets to UMass. He's there for a couple of years. And I believe there were some players that had some hostile feelings about him being the head coach. So it just hasn't worked anywhere he's gone. He's never improved an offense anywhere that he's been. So, I make the game around 21. It's a little bit too high for me. You can see that there's others that have power ratings that make that, because 24s are getting scooped. Probably a stay away for me. If I had to pick a side, if there's a knockdown on the Wisconsin number, I would probably throw couch change on that.
All right, let's move on to the final game, final FBS versus FBS matchup on Friday. Let's talk a little TCU Stanford out west. Stanford, interesting case. I mean, college football week 1, anyone that tells you it's easy to handicap is lying, especially in today's landscape. So much turnover. There's just so much variance with all of the roster movement. And then the other piece you have to figure out, we just talked about Western Michigan. Bad team last year. How much are they going to improve, in year 2 of a coaching staff with a lot of returning experience? Where do they fall? That's the difficult part of off-season prep. Same thing with Stanford. This is a team, it was basically year 0 for Taylor last year. I mean, their roster got absolutely gutted in the offseason, and now they bring back as much production as any team in the country. They do have the oars across the quarterback chart. You got a stud freshman that's in the mix too as well. Wide receiver, strength of the team. My question with Stanford is, and look, TCU, they lost 2 offensive linemen, 3 defensive backs to the NFL from a team that really underperformed after making the national title. Hoping some transfers can help in that mix, but they have some really talented skill position players. Hoover back, quarterback, offensive line remains a bit of a mystery and a question mark. So we'll see how that works out. But my concern for Stanford, who I do think will be improved naturally, just in year 2 of Taylor, we both think is a good coach, a lot more experience. Still concerned about just the overall size of the offensive line, which, look, has to be better. They had only 15 returning career starts going into last year. Bring a ton back this year. Same with the defensive line. So are they going to get overpowered? And then in the secondary was horrendous last year. Bring everyone back, but I still think the safeties are really bad. There's some holes there. So a bit concerned about, just the interior of the secondary for Stanford. But, if this at 10-ish, I would lean with the tree. What say you?
Yeah, at 10, this is an absolute buy on Stanford. This offense is a headache for opposing defensive coordinators. Quarterback Ashton Daniels is back, and then the wide receiver Alec Ayomanor is there, and they are just a throw and catch combination that a lot of teams have struggled with, and really that's all because of pre-snap and what Troy Taylor does with his offense. If you break down the run concepts of what Stanford does, they ran as many plays that were labeled trick plays as they did inside and outside zone read from a rushing perspective. It's crazy what this offense does. It is a beautiful thing to watch. Stanford may not win a lot of games, but it's a fun offensive watch. So much pre-snap motion. It's like Kansas on steroids, except this is like number 2, number 3 in the nation and up tempo. So they can really catch defenses off guard. And that's what goes into the handicap is this TCU defense was abominable last year. They fired Joseph Gillespie, that 3-3-5, sort of that pinch that they were trying to do in the middle, stop the run, limit explosives, didn't work from any angle. They were back to square one when they let Gary Patterson go before Sonny Dykes got there. They went and hired Andy Avalos, and the first thing that they decide is we're going to run Avalos's 4-2-5 that he had up at Boise State, same defense he had at Oregon. Neither of them worked out well whatsoever. So now TCU's decided they're going to go to a 4-man front, and then immediately their best interior player on the defensive line, Demonic Williams, decides to hit the transfer portal and go to Oklahoma. So there's not a lot of depth in this defensive line. They're putting extra guys. Depth's a huge problem, and they're going to try to stop the run. And you really don't know. I mean, it's a balanced offense for Stanford, but it's a crazy, if you're following the motion, you're going to get tied up and you're going to have some chunk plays go past you. The big problem for TCU also is there's just no havoc in this defense whatsoever. They did not get anything in the portal that suggests that they're going to increase their tackles for loss, increase their sacks, or increase their PBUs. So, we'll see what this defense can do, but I'm just not a fan of the depth. I'm not a fan of Avalos. And then when you go back and you look at what Troy Taylor did last year with Stanford when he had time to prepare, look at 2 of these wins last year, Hawaii and Colorado. If you go check those out on the schedule, Hawaii was game 1. Troy Taylor had all summer to prepare for that. They won that game. And then when they played Colorado in the middle of the season, Troy Taylor had 2 weeks to prepare for that Buffalo's team. They won that game outright as double-digit underdog. So there's a case to be made that Troy Taylor here, you give him extra time because he literally, interviewing him and seeing it, he's like a professor. He's running around with a book that he could throw and give you an injury. I mean, it's really great what he does from an offensive perspective, and he is very prepared on game day. Not like Sonny Dykes, who was a 21-point favorite last year, and Colorado beat him in the very first game of the season. That does not instill confidence in me whatsoever. Give me Stanford plus 10. The defense, I think, is still going to be horrible, but the Cardinal their best game plan is shootouts with everybody, which they can do. So I'll take 10 points.
Yeah, the good news is strength for Stanford's at wide receiver, and I think that's where you want to attack this TCU team. Linebackers are really, really good. Bring in Orr too. You already had a bunch of guys there, but the secondary is brand new. You had a couple guys come back, but you lost a number to the NFL. You bring in a couple transfers from Utah and ODU. You're going to have a brand new starting safety, a brand new defensive scheme. So I think that's probably where you want to attack, which is potentially good news for Stanford, assuming they can just get a few stops. You mentioned last year's game Stanford, Hawaii, much to my chagrin. I think I had Hawaii plus 10. I think they made it close as a favorite, and they got their doors blown off. You know why? Well, for many reasons, but part of that is because they played in week 0, and they had to play week 1. You had a rested team come in with a lot of time to prepare, which leads me, it's a good segue, into second down and our favorite overdog. For those new here to the podcast, favorite overdog, voicemail caller. Don't forget about the voicemail this season. 959 Bad Beat called, said we should start betting some more overdogs. Think he meant favorites, but now we affectionately call them overdogs. So favorite of the weekend. I'm going to keep it easy. I'm going to go with Arizona, 31 or better against New Mexico. New Mexico played last week. On paper, you might say it was a valiant effort, but you got to remember the market just bet and bet and bet and bet and bet against this team with an FCS team that had some pieces that they had to replace. And you might say, hey, New Mexico could have won that game. They got dominated statistically. I mean, gave up 600 yards. New Mexico had 2 scoop and scores. So Bronco Mendenhall will probably get it turned around, but it's going to take some time. And what happens when you have to play in week 0 and the other team doesn't? Number one, you have to travel. They don't. You had to prepare for another opponent. They didn't. They could have prepared for you. And you had to put stuff on tape that they can now adjust for, and they didn't have to put anything on tape. Arizona, I think, comes out, should score at will. This New Mexico defense didn't look like it's going to put up much resistance. There are questions on this Arizona roster. Defensive line, outside of the San Jose State transfer. Left tackle, got to replace a pro there. Wide receiver depth outside of McMillan. So, there are some questions on this roster, but quarterback 2, but I don't think New Mexico can exploit any of them. Week 1 versus week 0 edge here. I like Arizona to lay down the hammer. Brand new head coach he wants to name a number here and put on a show with my guy Fafita. So going back to my Cats, where are you going for your favorite overdog?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. New Mexico's box score was horrific, and they were spotted 14 free points. So this is going to be a problem here for them. I'm going to stay in Norman. I love Oklahoma here. I'll reiterate 73-0 against Arkansas State in the opener. This is their first game as a team in the SEC. Jackson Arnold had a terrible bowl game, and this offensive line needs every single snap it can get over these first 3 games before they eventually have to take on Tennessee at home. That one has been circled for a very long time for Josh Heupel coming in. So I expect there to be as much starter activity on the offensive side as possible. And Temple, 5 takeaways last season, FBS low. That's pretty stuck. It's only 5 more takeaways than you and I had last year in college football. So Oklahoma all the way here.
All right, moving on to third down. Our first underdog moneyline parlay, our favorite moneyline underdogs of the weekend. I'll keep mine short and sweet. I always say that, then I ramble. I'm going to go with North Texas against South Alabama. What am I looking for, especially early in the season with these? I'm looking for variance as part of it. A lot of variance in this game. These are 2 teams outside the top 100 in returning production, those being South Alabama and North Texas. Very similar in what they lost, right? South Alabama lost their quarterback, their star running back, their star wide receiver. North Texas lost a 3,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver for the first time in program history. We're replacing a lot. New quarterbacks. So, but when I look at this, I think North Texas has the more reliable quarterback now. And in the Morris and Morris combo on that offense, South Alabama, major questions on the back end of their defense. And this modified air raid offense, I think, can attack that. But there's just a lot of variance with this game. So I'm going to go with North Texas to get it done. This is a South Alabama team that in the spring, they lost their head coach, 5 starters, 3 on the defensive side of the portal. So it's a team, a lot of turnover. Not sure the quarterback is ready. So I'm going to go with the Mean Green.
Yeah, I'm going to move over to the Mountain West, and I'm going to support an FCS team to beat a team from the Mountain West, which really isn't that shocking because in week 1, there is always a top 10 powerhouse FCS team that seems to upset one of our lowly group of 5 teams. And we have that in Sacramento State playing San Jose State. San Jose State is expected to be at the bottom of the Mountain West. Sacramento State is expected to be at least a quarterfinal team in the FCS playoffs, potentially a semifinal team. Andy Thompson is now the head coach there. He was the defensive coordinator for Troy Taylor, who we just talked about at Stanford, and he's had them in the playoffs every single year. The offense might be the most experienced in all of FCS. Their dual threat quarterback, Caden Bennett, is back. He gets all his targets from Devin Gandy, Anderson Grover, and Jared Gibson. An extremely explosive unit, an extremely high success rate unit that is going to move the ball and score a ton of points here. And Bennett was heavily recruited at quarterback by Boise State. I mean, he easily could be playing on the FBS level. And then the offensive line is one of the best in all of FCS. Also, All-American Jackson Slater returns to anchor that line. Now, the defense could be a problem when we're talking, going up against San Jose State. The defense has just 2 starters back, but Sacramento State, the FCS, this happens too. They reloaded from the portal. They went and raided other teams from the Big Sky, Idaho State being one of them. They got safety moving on Kenyon the third. They have players and talent on the defensive side, but you have to ask, can San Jose State take advantage of Sacramento State's defense? And we're asking that because Ken Niamalo Totolo is here from Navy, where he ran the triple option offense. But San Jose State's not running the triple option offense. They're going to run the spread and shred. And if you don't know what the spread and shred is, that is Nick Rolovich's offense when he was at Hawaii. And now their new offensive coordinator, Craig Stutzman, is going to run it. Recently, he was the passing game coordinator at Texas State last year. So you can see that, what the head coach is familiar with, the exact opposite is what's going to be on the field. And Stuckey already mentioned that there's a lot of depth charts being released with a lot of oars on it. Well, San Jose State's one of them too. Although they did come out in the presser this week and say that we have named a quarterback internally. We're not going to tell anyone who it is. It's going to be between Emmett Brown or Walker Aguette. It doesn't matter. Neither of them have any way to get the ball to their best player, which is Nick Nash, which is really the only player on this San Jose State offense that's going to be running this version of the run and shoot. And then on the defensive side for San Jose State, they returned just 2 of their top 10 tacklers on the defense. The number is justified where it's at. It opened at 7 earlier this year. It's come all the way down to 3. There are some numbers out there that are above 3, but this is a Sacramento State team that has a chance to compete for the FCS national title going against potentially one of the worst group of 5 teams out there that is going through a scheme change that is brand new to everybody there. And they don't even have a quarterback identified. So give me Sacramento State, roll Hornets, money line all the way.
Yeah, could be a long year for the Spartans. So that's our money line underdog parlay. We have little mean green and some Hornets, some mean green Hornets. Let's have a profitable year with those. That normally would do it, but we added 1 down this year. We're going for it. Not enough college coaches go for it on 4th down. We're going for it. 4th down, our favorite bet. You only get 20 seconds because we're going to talk about both these games in the main section of the pod. I'll start. Eat 'em up, Cats. Sam Houston State catching double digits, upgraded at the quarterback position. Really came on at the end of the year last year. Could have easily won 4 straight. Had some heartbreaking losses, but quarterback better, wide receiver better with some guys returning from injury. Defense lost some guys, but I think they'll be okay. And I'm not sure Rice can fully take advantage of some of the questions in the secondary. They're really going to miss McCaffrey. I think this game's close. Rice, not a team that profiles as a great, really good, bigger favorite. So give me Sam Houston, eat 'em up, Cats. Colin, you got 20 seconds to make your case. We'll break this game, I know, down more in depth later.
Imagine seeing our faces or hearing our voices for the first time and we're talking about Sacramento State and Sam Houston State. That's what we do. So I'm going to go with USC plus 4.5 on Sunday night against LSU, one of the biggest games of the weekend. To break it down shortly, these 2 teams just hired a defensive coordinator, each one of them, and USC won the day with Danton Lynn coming over from UCLA, completely revamped that defense. I can't say the same about Blake Baker coming to LSU from Missouri. Missouri was horrific in defensive finishing drives. Everybody that crossed the Missouri 40 last year averaged 4.6 points per game, per trip past the 40-yard line. I do not see LSU's defense improving whatsoever. That's going to be a problem in this game with that USC offense.
Stop what you're doing right now and subscribe to the newest college sports YouTube channel.
College football is around the corner, and the new BBOC channel is your destination for betting on college sports.
Interviews with former college athletes and other topics such as College Football 25.
Subscribe now and get in on the action.
All right, that'll do it for us. You got over 2 hours, which is always our week 1 episode's always the longest. We got to cover so much ground, and we just get so excited talking about all these teams and so much newness. And these teams get newer every year. By the way, we will be back on Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, our live show. So make sure you check that out. Myself, Colin, Mike Calabrese will talk some Group of Five. Brett McMurphy will be there. And Johnny Manziel will have a segment on that show. And Colin and I will be back for our recap show out Monday morning. Call the voicemail, bitch, yell, scream at me when I have another losing week one. 959 bad beat. Let it off your chest. Or call just anything you want to talk about. If you want to leave a positive, something, that'd be nice, but highly doubt that. What you can do to help us to make up for all this screaming. What were you going to say?
And ask Mitchell to leave it in when you praise us. Those get cut.
Yeah, that's unlikely to happen too. But to make up for all the screaming and negative, what you can do is subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy, leave a 5-star review. I have a bunch of giveaways to do. Our producer will announce them, tell you what to do. So I got to do, leave a 5-star. It doesn't matter what you say. And then I do a bunch of giveaways. I think we have about 10 of them today. So thank you for that. Make sure you do that. We will be back next week with our week 2 betting preview on our normal time, overnight, Thursday night into Friday morning. We'll recap, as I mentioned, Group of 5 guys. Make sure you check them out. They go through all the Group of 5 guys. And if you want our picks even earlier, Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll have part of the podcast, record that live each and every week, only on the BBOC new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, like the videos there. Help us out. Help us grow that. But that'll do it for us. As robust of a breakdown as you'll get, and as many games. I think we hit 31 games in 2 hours and 15 minutes. That'll do it for us. Good luck this weekend. Just pray for me within the gods. I need a week 1 winning weekend. But have fun. Hope you find some winners. If you're riding along, let's go. And we'll see y'all on Saturday. Cheers.
Peace out.